Hello, Whitefish! Today's episode, we uncover a crisis spreading across Montana's most vulnerable communities like wildfire. The Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel are actively preying on Montana, chasing enormous profits from fentanyl and meth. In Los Angeles, a fentanyl pill sells for $5. That same pill can bring in $100 in Montana. With vast open spaces, limited law enforcement, and complex jurisdictional rules, especially on Native American reservations, these cartels are exploiting Montana communities already on the brink. This cartel activity is poisoning more than our communities. They're polluting our rivers, destroying our wildlife, and threatening the very landscapes we pass on to future generations. To help us understand how and why this is happening, we're joined by retired Lieutenant John Norris, a former California game warden who found himself in a deadly gunfight with cartel operatives in the foothills of Silicon Valley, California, which uncovered a massive statewide toxic cannabis operation linked directly to the Sinaloa Cartel. Also with us is Nic McKinley, a former CIA operative, Air Force PJ, and CEO of DeliverFund. Nic knows the playbook of both cartel and terrorist networks. Together, we'll break down the mindset, the incentives, and the systemic gaps that have allowed cartel influence to spread from Montana's reservations to every corner of America. Today's episode is brought to you by Thrivers Coffee. If you would like to help support the fight against human trafficking, visit thriverscoffee.com to order your coffee and make a difference today. Go Pills are a blend of 8 nootropic neurochargers that support focus, clarity, attention, fast recall, and decision-making. These have actually been tested by some of the U.S. military's top special operators who have given rave reviews to Go Pills. You can get 15% off your order when you use the code HELLO15 at checkout when you visit gopills.com. I am extremely excited and also terrified for today's topic because this is something that I think most people, the majority of Americans, don't know the depth of what we're going to talk about, and that is how deeply cartels have embedded themselves in America. And we're going to talk about 2 areas that shocked me when I learned about this, especially being here in Montana and previously in California. We're going to talk about how the cartels have embedded themselves in national forests and wildlands and the reservations of Montana. And I'm going to introduce my guest today. My first guest is Lieutenant John Norris. He is the author of Hidden War. He worked as a California Department of Fish and Wildlife game warden and co-developed the Marijuana Enforcement Team, or MET, to combat cartels operating in California. He has appeared on Fox News, NBC, National Geographic's Wild Justice, and numerous podcasts, including Jack Carr's Danger Close and the Joe Rogan Experience. Thank you for being here, John.
Awesome to be here, Morgan. Thanks for having me.
Totally. Yeah. And my now soon-to-be co-host, Nic McKinley, been on my show 3 times, former CIA operative, Air Force PJ, tech entrepreneur, and the CEO of DeliverFund, a counter-human trafficking intelligence organization that trains, equips, and advises law enforcement and uses cutting-edge technology to fight human trafficking across the country.
Thanks for having us.
So,
super impressed you did that from memory, by the way.
I know. Well, I've had you on the show enough that I have it pretty well memorized. But I'm glad to have you both because I think why I'm excited to have you on, Nic, is you have so much experience with counterterrorism operations in the Middle East and Africa that I'm curious to see how cartels and terrorist organizations are similar, how they operate in very similar business fashions, and how we can then know that, or how we can use that information to disrupt what they're doing. So let's start off with your origin story. You started as a game warden before finding yourself into actual firefights with cartel grow ops in Northern California. Can you walk us through when and how you first discovered that Mexican cartels were using California's beautiful national parks for illegal grow operations?
No, you bet. And Nic, got to say, good to meet you today. Being a PJ, that's near and dear because we worked with a lot of PJs out of the National Guard, the Counter Drug Task Force out of Moffett Field. So the 129th, we had a PJ on every op when we integrated with our military assets. And what people don't know, I'm going to jump ahead for a minute.
Totally.
The cool thing about our special forces groups and our PAVHawk teams in America is when they're not deployed, and they weren't deployed at the time, between deployments for the GWAT, the Global War on Terror, they were doing counter-drug support for law enforcement all over America, and especially in California when the cartels started to embed. So I had Moffett Field right up the road because I grew up in Silicon Valley. born and raised, and in all those foothills and ranches and state parks. People don't realize that the Silicon Valley is full of pristine backcountry, pristine wildlife. But when you think of the tech capital of the world, you don't think of that. But lo and behold, we have military assets up in Moffett, you guys, and 3rd and 7th Special Forces groups out of the Army, literally integrating and supporting missions against the cartels going back as early as, mid-2000s. But when I started my career as a game warden, way back in 1992, I'm going to date myself, and I went into the academy. The last thing I thought I'd ever be doing for the latter half was hoisting in and out of Pavehawks, short hauling under Jet Rangers, leading a sniper unit we developed, advanced canines, running everything from helicopter operations, small unit tactics, dedicated to fighting primarily the Sinaloa cartels at that time, but it would morph into many more cartels throughout America, putting toxically tainted marijuana plants in the forest for a billion-dollar cash industry in the black market, toxically tainted with EPA-banned neurotoxin poisons that they're importing illegally from across the border. And that would become really our mandate for the specialized unit, the marijuana enforcement team we formed in 2013, that unbeknownst to many people, the reaction would be, what are game wardens doing on drug cases? What are they doing going into marijuana fields? Go catch a spotlighter, go check somebody for too many fish, or an over limit of animals or something like that. What the public really didn't know until we started to do this on the game warden front, the wildlife conservation model, was that these are some of the biggest environmental criminals, as well as being a huge threat to our public safety, because of these poisons, because of the waste they leave in the waterways, because of how deleterious these poisons are, which I'll get into detail a little bit later. But that's kind of what happened midway through the career all the way up to the end. And the first grow site that I personally found back in my home area started in Riverside County, Southern California. And I know you're familiar, a fellow California guy, and now a transplant to the great state of Montana, thankfully. And we're over the hill, not far from you guys here in Whitefish. Early 2000s, I'm getting calls from a biologist buddy, a guy I grew up with, friend of the family, very savvy in the outdoors, great woodsman, and he's a fisheries biologist doing his master's study at San Jose State, my alma mater as well. He's doing grad work. I've gone and graduated. I'm now a warden back at home, 3 years in Southern California. I finally get to go back to the Gilroy position, which puts me right smack dab in ground zero where I grew up. So a dream position, really. Had no idea I'd be dealing with cartels in the home front. And GI, as we call him in the first book, call signed obviously for safety reasons. He calls me one day in the middle of April and goes, dude, the study I'm doing up on the Palisou Ridge on this beautiful public park that's closed to the public being developed on the edge of Henry Coe State Park, which is the second largest state park in California, 105,000 acres. I learned to backpack there. I met a game warden back there that changed my life to go this direction versus the other direction I was going professionally. And he's been studying red-legged frog, yellow-legged frog, migrating steelhead fish, right, that come all the way up from that Pacific Ocean, come all the way inland and fight those little turbid streams to lay their eggs and go back down to the ocean and spawn to rear small steelhead. And same with these aquatics. All of these species are threatened and endangered, or at least threatened, a species of special concern for the country. And he's doing a long-term study for his graduate work, and one creek is just bone dry in the middle of April. And the creek's dry, fish are dead, frogs are dead. There's all this visqueen plastic and debris of, camp implements that have washed 2 miles down this channel, down to the base of this stream. And he's pissed off. He's horrified. So he calls me, his game warden buddy. And of course, I'm like, well, that's weird. It's April. Winter runoff is at its peak. Mm-hmm. That creek should be ripping like, a river we could raft, man. This is crazy. So I throw him in the truck. He's a good, solid ride along. We go up to the top of the mountain. We dive down this canyon, and we go into one of the most pristine creeks I'd ever been in, and I hadn't been in this particular part of my county. And it was just magic. Grand Canyon-like streams, really, really pristine waterways. And we find where this diversion is that's diverting the water. Now, at this time, I'm thinking, guys, okay, maybe this is another landowner that's stealing the water for whatever reason. Sometimes, very rarely, our cattlemen and our ag industry in the Silicon Valley foothills, just like here in Montana, are just amazing people. They're staunch conservationists. They do more for conservation than people realize. Cattle ranching gets really a bad name, that it's destructive, and we know just the opposite when it's done right. But I thought, well, occasionally you get an outlaw out there that's desperate, or maybe you have a landowner that's diverting water for agriculture, or maybe livestock illegally. That's what I expected to see. And we get up top of the mountain, we dive down this canyon, and we find this first basket, what we call a check dam. We call them check dams. The cartels call them check dams as well. And they basically hand dug a dam where this creek was in full flow, lined it with visqueen plastic, and there's an outlet, single 1-inch hose going down a completely dry creek bed into the abyss, 100 yards below us, into vegetation, and we don't know where it goes. So right away, the officer safety concerns, the sixth sense. I've been in hadn't had a gunfight yet, but I'd had a lot of close calls because even doing the traditional game work, very dangerous job. You go up against guys spotlighting at night. You go up against people murdering somebody in the outdoors, doing a sexual assault, doing a meth deal. And we ran across a lot of that, especially in Riverside County where I started, very violent, but I'd never had to use deadly force. And now I'm about to find out that we're going to deal with a whole different level of enemy, these Sinaloa Cartel gunmen, which we hadn't seen yet. And we both knew something wasn't right. That was not your typical water diversion. What the heck would someone do such a creative impoundment for? And it was ingenious. You got to give these guys an A for effort with respect for kind of guerrilla tactics, and that's what this really reminded me of, having family members that fought in Vietnam and telling me stories and seeing pictures. I go, okay, this is like flash forward to that type of tactic. So we went in very carefully, very quietly, stalked down that creek bed, and pretty soon we start to see 18-inch tall marijuana plants on both sides of the creek. Banks are cut out. No water is flowing, but that water line is obviously feeding these plants at some location. And then we start to see water lines and chemical bags and like pump sprayers, stashed in the brush. And I'm going, this is messed up, man. I know how pristine this waterway is from the game warden standpoint, do a lot of environmental water damage pollution cases. And now I'm looking at, I don't see any people, but who would go to this effort? And then we see them. Mm-hmm. And very quietly ahead of us downstream, but they're on an uphill stretch and it's kind of a flat part of the creek. Two guys dressed in OD green, old school battle dress uniforms, showing tactics. I mean, actual tactics we would use in special ops, moving super quietly, not talking, using soft little hand signals. The guy in the lead had a machete and some other tools, and he was kind of checking plants, the small marijuana plants, checking drip lines and kind of repairing them. And the guy in the back had the AK, and he's got it looked like a holster. He definitely had a sidearm on him, and he is scanning tactically. Head goes where the rifle goes. He's looking behind him, checking behind him, like what our tail gunner would do in our stack, right? And you know this, Nick, from operational standpoint, from CQB, whether it's indoors, outdoors, or rural, those tactics kind of apply. And I'm like, and they're of Latin descent.
Somebody who knows what he's doing.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they're in my backyard. They're right below Henrico State Park, which is near and dear to me. I wouldn't be a game warden if it wasn't for Henrico State Park. And they're literally below that. And I went, all right, this is crazy. This is not your typical bad guy. And looking at them, they look more like kind of Sandinista rebels, going back to that whole story, back in the Ollie North and the Contras and all of that going on. So right away, we got careful. We hugged the bank. We're hiding as much as we can because they're coming at us. They're about 50 yards downstream, but coming almost level. I have an AR M4. I got a red dot. I got a backpack. Our radios have no coverage. We're in a box canyon. There's no cell coverage. He's an unarmed civilian, however savvy GI is. And now I've got an unarmed civilian with me. I can't get communications out to anybody. And I'm watching these guys work their way down, checking plants. And that gunman, especially with that 7.62, that Russian derivative, I'm going, okay, this is going to get crazy. We cannot get detected, or this is going to go south. Fortunately, they got 15 yards from us. And they were on the edge of the bank, and we're hugging into a cut bank of the creek. Gun is up, and I can tell you right now, you guys know that heartbeat, that adrenaline dump, just watching, just don't see us, don't see us, don't see us, because I had no doubt, seeing how the intent they had, unlike your traditional poacher in most cases, that if they make eye contact and he's got his and I've got mine, this is not the gunfight I want to get in today.
Right.
You know,
and there's probably more.
And there's probably more, right? And it's whisper mode, so you have no idea what's downstream. We know we got 2 miles of creek to where that road starts. But fortunately, they didn't detect us. They exercised all those field craft to stay quiet, and they just kind of circled, and they went back up to check their plants further downstream along the hillside, and we gave them a comfortable gap, 10, 15 minutes, and then we started to, kind of do a reverse overwatch, bounding, kind of working our way back, getting up the creek, get up that hill as fast as possible, get to the truck. And the whole time, my eyes are just as big as silver dollars processing what the heck is going on. Now, at this time, we didn't know about the carbofuran, metaphos, these insecticides that were developed in the 40s and 50s by American corporations that were really some of these actual poison products, the things that make them up, were some of the chemicals the Nazis developed for their chemical warfare program in World War II. No joke. So these are nerve agents that are in these bottles, and Hidden War, both editions, the newest edition, goes into a lot of color photographs of what metaphos looks like, what a dead animal looks like from ingesting like 3 drops of this stuff. Did not know we had nerve agents on these crops, and that they anticoagulate your blood. They shut down your central nervous system. Anyone that ingests it, potentially harmless, fatal, if they don't get atropine or they don't get medical treatment right away.
Yeah, this one.
There it is.
Yep.
That's perfect. Yeah, and that's just one example of the type of poisons we would now start to deal with for really the remainder of my career, all the way until operational retirement in 2018. But we got out of there safely, and now I'm starting to get to know narcotics task force, mainline law enforcement teams I hadn't worked with. DOJ comes into the picture, start to get to know DEA, how the DCEP grant works, and now all of a sudden we're into dealing with that problem. A month later, we would come back, and GI and myself and some game wardens would kind of be the bird dogs, the guides to get the task force in, and then we'd peel to the back of the stack, and we found those same 2 growers, and we chased them out. We didn't catch them. We did an announcement, and then we eradicated 7,000 plants that day, and that was my first day meeting a fellow PJ, because they called in the Pavehawk from Moffett Field because it had been a heck of a day. And we had all this marijuana we had eradicated, and we had to hoist that out. And the Pavehawk was on station with some Special Forces teams, but also some Air Force PJs. And they came in and hoisted us out of the grow that day, which was an e-ticket ride on a Pavehawk for the first time is badass. We would go to work with you guys out of Pavehawks.
I've been in 3 of them that have crashed. So like, if I don't get on another one, I'm
good.
good.
Yeah. And I had a lot of buddies, that operationally on the military side that you were doing said, it's not always, roses in these ships, and a lot of crash issues, but that was a different kind of day. But as I'm going up in the hoist with my partner next to me, what's going on in my mind is, well, wait a minute, we just chased these guys out. Tactically, I know I could have caught him. If we had really done an apprehension like a snatch, we could have caught him. But that wasn't the emphasis at the time, because all that was being funded by DEA was plant count. So we'd chase bad guys away, right? They dump their guns, maybe take them with. They get away. Unbeknownst to us at the time, gentlemen, this isn't the only grow this organization is responsible for. These guys are vetted growers from Mexico. They're really good at what they do. They're apprentice-level journeymen. They're going to get put in another grow. And then later on, what we learned come 10 years later, that I was fighting the same guys that are poisoning all our people here in Montana, our new home state, with fentanyl, with methamphetamine, that they're responsible for human trafficking rings, child sex, gun running. They're polycriminals, and they're just different derivatives of this multi-billion-dollar corporation. And they're incredibly, as you know, good at it. Vertical integration, distribution figured out. They work like a special operations force, man. They don't have any red tape, and that's why they're undercutting the legal cannabis market, especially in the states of California, Maine, Michigan, that have regulated poorly. We can get into that later.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother mess. But that's the type of criminal we were starting to see, and that was the first one that really opened my eyes to the environmental crime. But what was most frustrating about that mission, guys, was we took all the plants, but we left all the infrastructure there. Bad guys got away, but all that water diversion did get taken out. So we didn't get that creek back. Okay, and we didn't know that EPA banned poisons, carbofuran, metaphos, all those trade names like we talk about in my book. We didn't know those were all over in the water. We didn't know they were in the check dam pumping dirty water to the plants. So not only do you have this Superfund site that animals are not going to survive in, and that was full of not just the endangered aquatics, but deer and wild hogs, all those big game species, we like in this, like states like this. You can't eat those animals. You can't harvest those animals. They've ingested a neurotoxin. Everything's tainted. And that made the wheels spin that day going up on that hoist line into one of your old ships. I went, oh no, something's got to change. And the thing was, when I talked to the team leader, and in all fairness to him, they're from a narcotics task force group. They're like, we don't have the bandwidth to clean up the environment. We're not here. We're not going to collect garbage.
It's not their mission.
Yeah, not their mission. We're not going to go chase bad guys too long into the day. It's not safe. And I go, I totally get that. But I'm thinking there's going to be a bigger picture here. And we got to get this out in the public knowledge that this is something we need to address. And many years later, that would get addressed. And funding wouldn't just be based on plant count, but it would be bad guys caught, guns seized, and tons of trash taken out, miles of poly pipe. And going into the book, I have some pretty mind-blowing stats of what our team did in 6 years. One team, and it was just a microcosm of what was going on the West Coast, but 3 million poison plants eradicated, 456 miles of that black poly pipe that I call it, that's their black gold. But that's basically doing so much environmental damage when you get all that water in a pipe and you kill a stream.
Oh yeah,
it's exponential effects, right?
Yeah.
Nick, you know that.
We can't even calculate the damage that's done there from an environmental, wildlife perspective, how that's affecting ranchers, farmers. I mean,
just getting into the water supply.
Yeah.
The water tables, I mean, those chemicals don't go anywhere. So, I mean, and, I know you talked about like a lot of your canines had to deal with cancer, and a lot of it probably might have been from these chemical exposure, because I'm sure just tiny amounts of these chemicals are just so devastating.
Morgan, perfectly said. It's like 2 tablespoons of that stuff poured into a little channel could kill wildlife for 2 miles.
Jeez.
That's how deadly it is. And then the crazy part of it is you'd start to see the violence, and you start to see how violent these guys are. When you're chasing them away, you don't have a lot of engagements. But we decided later on, after that mission, I met some really good sheriff's deputies with the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office, and they were all SWAT snipers, and they were all conservationists and hunters from other states like Montana and Pennsylvania. So they saw us, we saw them, and kind of after that first mission with that task force, that's what we took away from that relationship. And so we kind of formed our own ad hoc team in the Silicon Valley, and my administrators were kind of like, I don't know about this, man. But I was a firearms instructor on our statewide firearms committee. I was into tactics. I was already trained in, mainline SWAT stuff and snipers, and we had gone to all those schools. But that's not what game wardens were known for doing.
Sure.
So, of course, you have that stay in your lane, this is not really what we're supposed to do. And I'm like, well, I've never seen a more environmentally damaging criminal in my life. And this isn't a citizen of the U.S. This is somebody from a narco drug group that's a deportable felon with a criminal history, extensive criminal history internationally, that you might see overseas when you were in the CIA.
Sure.
You might see them working an op in Spain, Mexico,
growing drugs in Pakistan or Afghanistan,
right.
or teaching weapons and tactics to insurgents in Iraq. I mean, it's that people don't understand that we're all connected thanks to the internet. So are the bad guys.
Perfectly said. So are the bad guys. They're building their teams as we build ours.
Yeah. One thing I think when I talk to people about this, like the cartels as an example, is the cartels have an incredible public relations platform, right? Where they get these narratives in Hollywood of all these terrible things, and they're going to show up at your front door and they're going to kill you and all that, and they don't understand that the cartels are extremely rational, extremely logical. Their moral and ethical compass obviously is broken, but these are incredibly bright people. These are Harvard MBAs. These are PhDs from MIT. I mean, these are incredibly bright people that are absolute masters of logistics. And when you think of cartel, you don't think of some little criminal gang. Think of a country. Think of a nation state. They have their own Air Force. Yeah. They have their own Navy, complete with submarines.
Yeah.
They have their own special ops units. They have, quite frankly, better weaponry, and quite frankly, better training than probably 90% of law enforcement
Possibly
in the United
so, yeah.
States.
Yeah.
So like, it's not, you know, when you think of cartels, you may as well say Russia, North Korea,
right.
Iran, China. Well, cartel China, same thing these days. But the point is that, like, it's not what people think. It's
right.
not this like ragtag group. It's, I mean, they have their own venture capital firms. They have their own private equity firms. They have their own businesses across the entire globe. And the estimates, you know, on what their market is not, it's not calculated in billions. It's calculated in trillions.
That's a key word right there.
Mm. Yeah. Nation state, not a criminal gang.
Yeah. Yeah.
This isn't the Bloods or the Crips.
Right.
Or the, you know, you know, one of the biker gangs, or,
right.
you know, Hell's Angels or something like that. No, this is a completely other level.
No, Nick, that you hit it on the head, and that's realizing that the guys at the top are running a nation state.
Yeah,
and it's amazing.
Of the country.
Yeah, cartel, and amazing how embedded they are. Like, I go into also in Hidden War. I think it's chapter 4. You're talking about guys top of the food chain, you know, running, say, Sinaloa or Jalisco New Generation or Gulf Cartel, whatever. And then you have these plaza bosses embedded all over the country. And a plaza boss in the marijuana world is a guy responsible for maybe 100 grows, say in one particular, like Northern California. But unbeknownst to a lot of people, that plaza boss isn't just doing weed. He's doing 22-pound meth cooks in the winter when you can't grow the outdoor cannabis, right? And all of this. And we actually picked up one of these guys. Our white dope team did with the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office right around 2011, 2012, right before we went operational with getting the chief to say, yeah, it's time to build this team and test it. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Here we go. But the crazy part about it was I got to sit in on that interview with DEA with multiple interpreters. So he's going to go away for a long time. This wasn't one of your sociopathic sicarios. Right, this guy was just as you described him, brother. Smart, rational, friendly, articulate, and he was just basically giving us information to lessen what he was going to be dealing with, and he was completely truthful. And so that was the one time I got to sit down, because you very rarely get a plaza boss. You very rarely get a guy in a grow that doesn't know anything except the first name of the guy he works for that's a fake name on a burner phone they replace every 2 weeks. So kind of like an Al-Qaeda cell, when we're talking about those similarities in Nick's world and my world, it's really crazy. They use the exact same tactics as Islamic radicalized terrorists. It's the same type of deal.
Well, they share best practices.
Yeah, and it's so effective.
They
right?
do.
It's so effective.
They do work together. I mean, the terrorists got to get guns and weapons from someplace.
Yep, 100%.
Right. You also don't really have any large terrorist organizations that are also not nation state sponsored. Right. Hezbollah may as well be the Delta Force of the Iranian, Republican Guard Corps. I mean, it's really the same thing.
Yeah.
And so this is all part of those countries' national security strategy. And so the cartels have money laundering issues. Very hard to launder money if you're not a nation state. And so those guys are happy to launder the money for them for a price, and then like they just do business together. It sounds oversimplified, but it's really that simple.
That's amazing. So how would you go about doing discovery on these grow sites around California? Because you're mostly in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah.
How do you, because Bay Area, especially going up to like Garberville area, it's like the mecca of cannabis cultivation. So how did you guys distinguish like a legit grow versus a cartel grow versus just some kids growing maybe 100 plants in their backyard kind of a thing?
The best part about then is it was really black and white, because we hadn't regulated cannabis on the recreational side yet. That was 2016 with Prop 64 in California. Now Montana is regulated, but because we don't have the outdoor climate, we just don't see that, cartel presence in the weed trade per se, although indoors we probably do. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But back then, it was really cut and dry. I mean, if you had a medicinal grow, say in the Emerald Triangle in Garberville or Humboldt or, out there, Fortuna or whatever, let's say on the coast, you see, usually by air. We're doing air flyovers. We're seeing what's in backyards. They're doing plant counts. They're doing inspections. And some of that stuff was unregulated. And there would be raids, usually from the air. We had CAMP program, Committee Against Marijuana Planting, DOJ funded, 5 helicopter teams statewide, and it was DOJ agents, DEA, Fish and Game, when we would start to get involved in 2005 in the CAMP program. And that's all they do is all summer. They'd be basically greenlit for 4 months, and they'd all have regions, and they'd hoist in or short haul in, eradicate, arrest if they needed to, and short haul out, and then use the birds to take that tainted weed out. But anything in the outdoors, anything on public land, regardless of what you're doing medicinally on your property, if you're responsible for that grow, and most people that were doing medicinal grows in their backyard weren't the cartels, and they weren't in national forests, they weren't in Forest Service, the Trinity or the Shasta National Forest, they weren't in Henrico State Park, or up on Sierra Azul where my partner was shot in 2005, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly.
Yeah, that's a crazy story.
But all that was cartel. Everywhere in California that was on public land, 95+% was Sinaloa Cartel based. And with embedded plaza bosses and people that had lived in the Bay Area, they live in Redwood City, they live in Fresno, they live in San Jose, California,
crazy,
where I grew up, and they live under everybody's noses, and they've got good IDs, and until they get caught in a crime, they really don't get picked up. Because like you said, Nick, their organization is so vetted, and they give them all the tools to hide in plain sight and still run, trillion-dollar enterprises. And that's the best way to look at it. So we would find it from the air. This was before Google Earth. This was before we had access to military-level satellite imagery. That would all come with the relationships we build with counter-drug, with the PJs, with the Special Forces, with DOJ, DOD. That would all happen when they'd realize, okay, game wardens are getting embedded. There's a tactical element to this. Nobody had been shot at yet in our world. No officer had ever been injured by a cartel gunman till my partner, young game warden, in 2005 on August 5th. And that's a day that just changed everything. I don't think I knew it consciously, but subconsciously I knew while we were in that firefight and waiting 3 hours for an air rescue when my partner's bleeding out from 4 holes. We go into this grow in the morning, and it's myself, and I just promoted to the lieutenant of the squad. So now I'm basically a team supervisor 21 days before this mission. And my partner that we groomed up out of the academy, Great Warden, Mojo as he's called in the book, and Bulldog, who is the other nickname for the young warden from San Mateo County, they're raring to go into a marijuana grow. They've already seen what I've been doing with the sheriffs. Take us on it, man. Come on, Lieutenant, let's go. And they were great guys, and they did great work in the traditional world. So we brought them on, and it was those same sheriff's deputies that I met a year before in the one that went awry when we found some, kind of loopholes or things we can improve. So it's just the 6 of us and an unarmed ranger from Mid-Peninsula Open Space. The grow's been scouted. We know there's one good grow site, maybe 7,000, 10,000 plants, a couple of growers. You never see more than 2 typically. And we're going uphill, the only way to get into this. So tactical disadvantage, but using the best tactics we could at the time. It's August, so it's super hot, and we go through one grow site, crawling on our hands and knees, and we go to, there's another grow site with kind of just nothing but cover issues and camouflage issues. 6-foot plants, manzanita brush really thick. So we're up on a skirmish line, basically, doing a frontal, careful assault, going really slow. We're no more than 2-3 yards apart from each other, spanning about 50 yards across this ridge top. And as we're working our way through,
scary stuff.
And keep in mind, guys, this is in the affluent city of Los Gatos foothills of the Silicon Valley.
That's crazy.
And our radios aren't working really well, but our cell phones are working great because we're looking down at Facebook, Meta, Cisco, Oracle. We're looking at all the tech companies and a bluebird summer day all the way out to the South Bay. And I can see Moffett Field. I can see the hangars where 129th and the Air Force and military is going to eventually come from a lot. We weren't working with them yet directly, but we soon would be. And so we're going through this grow site, just working through the skirmish line, and I hear one shot go off ahead of us. And I know it's not an M4, the crack of a 5.56 that my sheriff brothers use. We're running M14s, mil-spec, chopped down and kind of configured, and it's not a big 7.62, right, 308 NATO. This is a medium bore like a 30-30 or an AK. And I know my guns, right? And I'm like, uh-oh. And I hear the crack, and seconds later, I just hear my partner, I'm hit. He said a lot of other colorful expletives. Fucker shot me, blah, blah, blah. And he drops. And all of a sudden, I'm hearing gunfire to my right. And it's my partner sheriff's deputies with their M4s. And the plants are so thick, I peripherally look over to scan with my M14, and I can just see plants moving and gases from the M4 flash hiders going up through the marijuana plants, but I can't see anybody. And I have no idea who they're engaging. So I'm starting to move toward them to see what they're doing to try to help them. And then I start to see something else move out in front of us, because we didn't know it at the time, but there was kind of a parapet dug out. It was a trash dump hole, as well as a position cut out in the back of it where guys could kind of sit with that cover of hard earth and kind of watch the grow below them, and then a bunch of debris. So they had multiple layers of canopy and camouflage. That's an ideal hide for us snipers or hunters. Again, it was another tactical awareness thing, like the first grow we had seen. Well, one gunman had shot one round out of what we had later learned was an SKS derivative, and that round had hit my partner, entered his left thigh, and then was tumbling out his inner left, tumbled and cartwheeled through his inner right, and exited out his outer right. So he had 4 holes in his leg, and he had literally a grapefruit size of tissue missing from inside that inner thigh. And how it didn't hit his femoral neck, I was like, it was millimeters from hitting it, or he wouldn't have survived.
Right.
But so, we're really new at the game. We have basic first aid kits. We don't have quick clot and anticoagulant.
You're not running tourniquets.
No,
Everyone's not
in 05.
Yeah,
in fact, and quick clot was just, you guys were just starting to use it in GWAT in the sandbox.
That was back when the quick clot would actually burn.
Yeah, that was the early crappy.
That stuff sucked.
And so I'm like, what are we doing here? So basically, I see movement, and here comes that gunman around the corner with that rifle. I didn't know he was the guy that shot my partner. We know now that he is, but now he's moving out around that corner. And I'm starting to scan, and I get half a policia out for an announcement. Gun comes up, and now I'm engaging with my M14. He disappears. I'm backpedaling, and I land and kick. I'll never forget. And there's some of the grow site pictures in the books go into this. It was those orange Home Depot 5-gallon buckets.
Oh yeah.
And that you'd get at any Home Depot, but they camo paint them. So, and it was all green and camo painted, all the water lines. So this is a grow site that these guys, unlike the first grow we did in 04, where we had that Payhawk ride, this one was much more camouflaged. These guys were far more tactical. Everything was camo painted like we would do our sniper kits, our rifles, take all the shine, mist up your uniform, really get brushy, right, for no shine. That was my partner shooter, but who my partners were engaging with their M4s, and they got him down. He had a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun chopped on me and Bulldog that we couldn't see 7 yards ahead of us. And right before he was about to press, they engaged him and neutralized him. We didn't know any of this.
Sure.
So this is, as you know, this is maybe a 8 to 15 second ordeal of a chain reaction that went down. And by the good graces, and even though we hadn't trained together with these sheriffs, and these new wardens came to the game, the tactical training in my agency had elevated considerably. I was overseeing a lot of that, thankfully, with good people, with military assets coming in, Tier 1 SWAT teams from the Bay Area. We were doing the exact same tactics as the sheriffs without knowing it. We didn't have radio compatibility. There were a lot of things that went wrong that day because it was a real ad hoc mission. Things would change after this, but it was mind-blowing to see how everybody did exactly what they were supposed to do. Nobody overshot their field of fire. Nobody, got off what they were supposed to cover, including our tail gunner. It was just a crazy day. The details I'll leave for the books and things like that, but because it's going to be belabored to get through it all. But that grow site told me how aggressive these guys are, and poisons were all over that grow site. We weren't really fully aware of their effects. We weren't really seeing the bottles. They were all over the plants, and nobody would come in and fly in to get us out because the hill wasn't secure. So we keep hearing helicopter rescue 15 minutes away. Well, the dispatchers in Silicon Valley, and this was a sheriff's operation, so we're working off their ops plan, but nobody had encountered anything like this. So They're saying, we've called Life Flight, they're on their way. Well, Life Flight is an ambulance with a blade.
Not showing up. No way.
What's it going to do in a
Scene
grow
safe
site?
is the very first thing that they're looking for. Yeah.
So Life Flight lands.
Plus they can't land.
Yeah.
It's interesting because a lot of people don't realize that, and part of the reason why I chose to go Air Force Pararescue instead of Special Forces or the SEAL teams or whatever is because PJs have a stateside mission.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah.
So
which is cool.
I've worked with operationally inside the United States, worked with HRT, worked with the DEA. It was before they were called the FAST teams. I can't remember what they were called before. But their DEA little, regional SWAT team kind of things. I had to work with the Secret Service on occasion. But yeah, like PJs are operational always,
which is cool.
So it's not just overseas, you're also operational inside the United States. And some of those are just like civilian rescues off of mountains, which are way scarier than combat sometimes,
right?
And some of those are combat operations embedded with law enforcement. And and you're usually showing, you're PJ, so you're showing up with the best gear.
Yeah.
All right.
You're looking at you going, who are these guys?
Everybody's like,
man.
wait, where'd you get you guys aren't running suppressors and night vision and all that stuff. And they're like, no, we don't. Like, this is my personal rifle, man. I'm like, oh, sorry.
That was that era in the day too. It was like, good luck, man. Beg, borrow, and steal.
Yeah, but we were, embedding with law enforcement in the stack, not as assaulters. We do our best to be, to kind of stay out of it, because like we just always thought, like, what would the paperwork look like
if you guys get in a gunfight with us?
Well, not so much us getting in a gunfight with us. It's we end up like, PJ ends up shooting a non-U.S. citizen on U.S. soil. Like, DOJ is going to deal with that. PJ ends up shooting a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil. Like there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be passing that hot potato around. So we were, but even if you're just there, armed in a defensive capacity, you're coming out of, a combat operation overseas,
right,
and then coming back to the United States, putting on the exact same gear, grabbing the exact same weapons, and now you're just embedding, as a support asset. So it was super fun because you always had something to do.
It was incredible, man, working with you guys in 3rd and 7th group. When they go, I can't believe we're doing missions with game wardens.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with special forces. Like you never see, like, the SEAL teams don't do that.
Right.
They don't do anything stateside.
Right.
With law enforcement, but the special forces teams, ODAs, do, and PJs are like, and PJs and combat controllers just constantly involved in something. Yeah. So it's super fun.
It's awesome to see in such a force multiplier. And now jumping ahead to declaring these groups as terrorists, what Trump's done with the new order, and we've been pushing this for years. I told Congress in my first testimony, I go, guys, these are domestic terrorists, and they need to be addressed as a number 1 to 5 national priority. We're in proxy wars all over the globe. We're talking about all these issues politically during the divisiveness of COVID and pandemics and the border control shift. I went, this is in our backyard to everybody, environmentally, you name it. And to see that kind of change, and to see military assets working appropriately with domestic law enforcement teams now on the southern border, and people are like, oh my gosh, this is so shocking. It's been going on for 20 years. They just didn't know because you guys were in with us. 7th and 3rd groups were in with us. And it was kind of interesting that it was not direct engagement. We don't want to be in the front of the stack. We don't want to be on the first assault team. We want to be here to support you guys. And there were days, man, that you guys on the PJ front or 7th group or whatever were absolutely lifesavers, because we were running out of people to do in custodies. We were taking out multiple grows. We had satellite grows going places. You never have a big enough team on some of these giant grows, and law enforcement teams don't have it. And I remember that day, I would learn a lot about air support tactics and who to talk to. And even the sheriffs didn't know this. Their dispatch didn't know this, because they're calling. We say, we need an ambulance, not an ambulance, but we need a life flight. We need an air asset that can come in, and they're going to need to bring a gurney and a hoist. You're not going to land up here. It's a brushy mountain like the top of a Vietnam mountain. This is what it is. We can't land a bird. Okay, cool. Life flight's inbound, ETA 15 minutes. Well, no harm on the dispatcher's side. They don't know who they're calling. They're just calling for a helicopter. So life flight's like, can't do anything up there. We don't have hoists.
Wait, there's people shooting?
Yeah.
We're not going anywhere near that.
We're not going in there. So they land at the church parking lot.
Yeah.
And now...
The church parking lot is amazing.
It's crazy, just down the road. And now all of these news choppers are circling overhead, probably 15 of them, 10 to 15 of them from every, and we're like, is that the camp bird? Oh no, that looks like they're trying to film us. And all this is going on. So we're popping what little smokes we have. And for trauma supplies, and from the PJ standpoint, Nick, you'll resonate with this. We have very much the basics. And then Apache, call sign now deceased, sadly, Mike D'Amigo, who's a sheriff's deputy sniper and was a Marine Corps veteran, he had seen a lot of combat. So from his standpoint, it was he had extra Israeli dressings, extra smoke canisters.
Sure.
He packed more than the CERT team, than the SWAT team gave them for trauma stuff. And if it wasn't for those Israeli dressings that Mike gave me, I don't keep Mojo from bleeding out, because they'd say 15 minutes and nobody would say, wait a minute, it's a hot zone. We can't go into that. So 2 hours and 30 minutes into this ordeal, and we've got suspects dead and down, and we don't know what their status is, if, who's down, who's not. We don't know any of that. And we're a tight little team, so we can't go track them. Mm-hmm. And we're just waiting for help. And 2 hours and 45 minutes, I'm like, on the radio, let me talk to your dispatch. We've got this scene clear, send somebody in. And it was the Cal Fire Huey, the battalion chief from California Fire, that came in and said, I don't care what the policy is, we got to get that kid off the hill. And they sent down a basket and a medic, and they're equipped because they have what a Pavehawk has in a little smaller ship. So they pulled him out, and then none of us were short haul certified yet, but the camp team was there with their jet ranger waiting to come in and eradicate the dope. Guys I knew, 2 of them were game wardens, and now we're short hauling out on our first short haul run, and he's going to the hospital. And now that thing's locked down for like 80 hours with every SWAT team in the Bay Area, DEA, FBI's there. They're waiting for squirters to come out. We had no idea what was going on. And now a game warden in California is shot by a cartel gunman in a grow site. So governor, director, what the heck are we doing in that? And Nancy Foley was our chief at the time, first female chief, and one of my partners and mentors coming up through the academy, and worked with her for years. She said it best. She says, hey, a huge environmental crime. These game wardens are tactically trained. I've been pushing better tactics with my trainers. I'm real proud of what they did today. It's a tragedy that we took an injury, but this is the fight we have to stay in. And she and the director at the time were able to keep us in it, but very delicately, where there was a microscope on us all the time.
Sure.
After that gunfight. But that told me right then, I don't see any bigger priority that we need to fight environmentally. Because I knew it wasn't isolated to California, I'd start to talk to other states and realize there were 27 other states having cartel grows in them. Mm-hmm. They just weren't to the level of California, because we're the weed state, right? One of only 6 Mediterranean climates, grow from February to almost Christmas. They're known for the Emerald Triangle, the best bud, like some of the best wine comes out of the Napa Valley.
Sure.
We grow great weed in the Golden State. So the cartels started there. And then it would just go on for years. We'd have 5 more officer-involved shootings, some close calls, till finally in 2013, Mike Carrion, one of my mentor academy instructors, was our chief, and he pretty much was going to be chief for a couple of years. And to get a team like this greenlit in the state of California under sanctuary state doctrine, we don't talk to ICE, don't talk to the feds, we don't talk about cartels, we're going to regulate weed soon. It was really amazing. I'm still blown away we even got the team greenlit.
Sure.
But because he fought the politics and said, handpick your 10, pilot program, July through September of 2013, we'll see where you're at the end, and if this thing is viable, we'll form something up. And 6 weeks into that testing program, we're finally starting to document accurately what we're seeing in these grows. And again, another collaboration with the Air Force and the Army was right when we got greenlit to do that, myself and now chief of our agency, my partner who was a captain, the administrative captain to put this team together, Nate, we get a request from the military saying, hey guys, we have 1 airship, ground crews, we got PJs, we got SF, we got a bunch of guys, and 2 birds we can pull from between Moffett and middle of California out of a Black Hawk team for the month of August. And we wanted to get with one group that'll really go out there aggressively and go after these grows, but we really like this environmental component to it because our ships can take 3,000-4,000 pounds, so we can take out a lot of trash. We can reclimate. So we're like, okay. So we called it Operation Pristine. I forget what the acronym sounded like, meant.
Right.
But from August 1st, August 31st, we worked nonstop every day with our PJs, with our airships out of Moffett, all over the state of California. And we had just gone operational like to test this thing 2 weeks before that. So being the lieutenant and team leader of this thing, I was like drinking through a fire hose going, all right, we're not going to stop. Where are we going next? And Operation Pristine alone, on number of plants, number of EPA banned chemicals, poison pipe, suspects run down and caught, arrest, canine deployments, weapons seized, just in that month, we didn't even believe it. And we went, okay, we're missing a ton of stuff. And now we can publicly put this out as fact of what we're seeing in California and see what's going on in the rest of the state. So by January 1st of 2014, there was no question. 6 weeks into that pilot program, the chiefs had us up for a little meeting. We were just going up to this meeting to beg for money. We were out of operational money in right around Operation Pristine ending. And they said, no, stop talking about money. You guys are greenlit. You're going to get through this pilot program. You're taking a break, form up the testing standards. And I want you operational January 1st of 14. You're working under special ops, straight line from the chief. You're leaving patrol. We'll take the political heat of what that means of good game wardens leaving districts, because we're not the thin green line, military and conservation for nothing. There's very few of us covering literally hundreds and thousands of square miles. So lieutenants and captains were going to lose really good game wardens, plank members that were passing on the generation, academy instructors, defensive tactics, firearms instructors, wardens of the year types, right? Highly decorated. And it was a political battle, for 2 or 3 years, because that's not what, they didn't want necessarily a group of game wardens to go off and play special ops ninja and disappear from patrol and not really see the importance of what we were doing on the cannabis front, because it was like traditional mindset. Nancy would always say, and it's quoted in the book, Chief Foley, she would say, change is inevitable, growth is optional. And we don't like change. We see this institutionally in law enforcement. Historical military, right, Nick? Morgan, you just see this, right? And even in business, if it's, hey man, if it's not broken, why are we fixing it? But this was really radical for us at the time. And now it's 100 plus game wardens are dedicated to just cannabis enforcement in California.
That's awesome.
Because of the water issues in a regulated bad system right now.
But you could also make an argument, and I'm sure the data would show that your impact in that 10-person team that's off patrol is economies of scale larger than it would have been had you been on patrol. Right. Yeah. This whole mindset that we need to have law enforcement continually on patrol. No, we don't. Right. Bad guys tell us where they are and what they're doing on X, on Facebook, on Instagram. The whole community policing model, the data shows that is dead. It doesn't work anymore because nobody knows their neighbor. Nobody knows their community, right? They got 648 friends on Facebook, but they don't know the people who live to their right and left.
Yeah, that's that's 100% spot. And that's adjusting to the changing demographic, the changing tide, and going, well, wait a minute, we've had good community policing. We know our districts. We're embedded. It's almost like you don't want to give up that traditional bond, especially game wardens that get to know their communities.
Sure.
We live, work, and patrol out of the house. We're not just law enforcement officers there. We're embedded members of the community, cattle ranches, helping them on poaching, going to their brandings. I still do that when I go to Silicon Valley. My closest friends are some of the most premier cattlemen in the Silicon Valley foothills, being the best conservationists that I've known since I was, my early 20s or maybe even childhood. But to your point, we don't want to break those bonds, but sometimes we have to let technology work, right? Because we just don't have enough people.
Well, they're doing that. So the focus, we see this in the fight against human trafficking, is we get cities that, especially rural America, will be like, well, that doesn't happen in my county. Be like, really?
Oh, well, guess what?
And then I'll pull the data and be like, oh, that's funny because in the last 30 days, there was 347 commercial sex advertisements in your county.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What? Did you hack that data? I'm like, no. And this is my problem. And this is going to be very controversial for saying this, but if you're a law enforcement officer, if you're in charge of law enforcement and you don't understand how the internet works, you should retire.
Yeah.
You are a dinosaur that is getting people killed.
Yeah.
Full stop.
You have to be
put in the work.
Yeah.
Stop being lazy and put in the work. And if you're this, what you did is a case study for not just this environmental issue, not just this marijuana enforcement issue.
Yeah.
It's a case study in how law enforcement should be thinking about fighting crime writ large.
Yeah.
And that's not my opinion. Like that's what the data shows.
Well,
and this is just a case study in that. So
it's spot on. It's
good on you.
No, I appreciate it, man. And I appreciate everything from our military brothers and sisters that made that possible, and in the sheriff's departments and the mainline, groups, because this, again, change being inevitable, but not everybody wanting to grow with it. It's uncomfortable, and it's uncomfortable. To your point, Nick, you hit it perfectly. What's happening in traditional law enforcement, even in rural states like Montana, that just, wait, that's going on in my community? Well, we don't see it, so we're not going to change our tactics. Well, it's there.
Well, they don't see it because they're not looking for it.
They're not looking for it.
And oftentimes
they're
not looking
reading
for
that digital data
because
that's telling them.
But also that means more work.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do more work.
Yeah.
Right? But you have these gung-ho law enforcement officers who are just like, oh, put me in, coach. Let's go. They want to do the work.
Let's go. Yeah. And to your point, like with what you're doing awesome with your group, with human trafficking, one of the most inhumane, subcontracting jobs of these cartel groups is human trafficking. And the same groups that we're fighting on the weed front today are part of a group that's running deadly fentanyl, and they're running advanced P2P super meth distribution, and they're trafficking people and kids, and it's a moneymaker that never goes away. It's not a one-time purchase, right? So kudos to what's going on with Deliver Fund. That is incredible. But we have to adjust our viewpoint, and we have to be looking at doing different things. And so we just don't want to change a lot of the time. It's more work, but it's also uncomfortable to go into that work when you don't really know it. And I think about us going into this cartel marijuana fight, and I think about that first gunfight, and I think about how blessed we were that everybody did everything right, but how ill-equipped we were, how radio compatibility we didn't have, how trauma medicine training we didn't have. That would rapidly change with the
So when was this?
2005.
So this is pre-Katrina.
Yeah.
So P25 encryption standards for radio compatibility hadn't been enforced by the FCC yet.
It hadn't.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so that day it was, I have my radio.
Yeah.
And, Snake has his radio, the other team leader, Craig, running at 4 Met. So I'm going to be pretty close to him, so we can at least whisper to each other, do hand signals, and if there's a radio transmission, one of us can relay. And so we paired up Fish and Game radio with Sheriff radio of the 6 of us that were there, and then all hell broke loose in the gunfight, and then we improvised. Well, that was right away. No. Radio's got to get better, and they did exponentially. And that really cool, motivated chief, Nancy, that I just mentioned, she debriefed this with us, and I told the story to the whole department at 2 different trainings, advanced officer training, where half the state comes, the other half goes. The second chapter of my first book, War in the Woods, was actually basically a debrief narrative, a tactical write-up of that incident, because we had never seen anything so crazy in the game warden front, really in law enforcement in general. And she published it through our publishing group in the agency, and every officer got a copy, and I got to tell that story. And what did we learn? Well, this was a year later, and right away we were starting to see anticoagulants coming in from overseas, tourniquets, Israeli bandages, and then trauma medicine got to be as important, sometimes even more so than high-speed, low-drag carbine tactics. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the most important thing is the radio. The second most important thing is the gun. The third most important thing is keeping the blood inside and the air moving.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys came in, and I can't talk about the trauma nurse that helped put our program together for OPSEC. We'll talk off recording, but it was PJs, you guys at Moffitt, and some of the 7th Group Delta medics that helped build our trauma medicine program. So we came out of the gate in 2013 with so much support. We went from traditional, ill-equipped to hyper-equipped. And once we started to get funding from different sources, the sniper team was formed up, MBGs came out, we had canine trauma medicine, the best trauma medicine practice, and would train, and they still do, and they've advanced since I retired with the new guys. Man, I mean, they're integrated with you guys all the time on the PJ Delta front or NESF Delta level medic, and we felt that was really important. And I think you say it best when you talk about the priorities of surviving an incident, and we haven't had anything drastic happen to us since I retired, or since before I retired, thankfully. It's amazing what a little training and knowledge can do in equipment, and it really paid off. But we would see this thing all the way until I retired operationally in 2018, and I published all of those figures that I could. And now this shift to private land because we've incentivized with bad cannabis regulations all over the country. And again, we always said, like, 30% of my job as the team leader for this unit, besides training development, running missions, equipment, whatever, 30% of it was outreach and education to educate people on the problem. So these book pictures and the PowerPoints I do at conventions and panels and community meetings, stuff I showed Congress and testified to, there's the civilian version, and then there's the stuff I can share with Ellie and guys like us in the room, right? Sure. The officer-involved shooting debriefs, the latest and stuff that's not going to get anybody in trouble on the civilian side. But I did presentations to grower groups, hunter groups, animal rights groups, but legislative lobbyists, governors groups, and we knew regulation was happening in California. And this is right about 2015, and I know I got 2-3 years left before I'm maxed and I'm on to this. Mm-hmm. And essentially, I would tell these groups, I said, guys, we know cannabis regulation is coming in California. We are the weed state of the world. If we're going to regulate, let's regulate right. The growers that are doing it by the numbers, that are environmentally conscious, they're conserving their water more so than I do, on my garden. They're doing everything right by the numbers. They're putting organic product out there. They're just illegal and running from us on the black market. But they're basically, that environmentalist. They're that traditional Cheech and Chong hippie type guy from Vietnam vet. I just want to, grow 20 plants, sell a little bit of weed to make some money to, keep the farm going. Pretty sedate, pretty harmless. I said, but if you don't keep that you don't keep that felony statute and go after these trespass cartels, we're dead in the water. Because if you don't do that, cartels are going to come, oh no, this is going to break the black market. So what do? When we regulated, and it passed 2016, so Trump's first presidency, and then the same night, that whole time, Prop 64 passes, and it's a misdemeanor. And for a juvenile infraction, and we get the little Sicario kids that are 16, 17, I can't tell you how many fisticuffs we've had with some of those guys that sadly are growing up under the savagery of some of their mentors, their uncles, and their fathers in grow sites. Infraction, it's like a seatbelt ticket, a $400 fine in California is the biggest fine. So the cartels went, awesome, man. Disneyland's wide open.
The cartels were probably funding the lobbying effort for the politicians. And so one rant that poor Morgan has had to hear multiple times is that
I get to hear it for the first time. Yeah.
There's a lot of problems with law enforcement in America, and that's not my opinion. Like I'm a firm believer. Don't bring your opinion to a data fight. Like that's just what the data shows. Yeah. Clearly, and like it's not even up for debate. That's not the fault of law enforcement. Right. That's the fault of our politicians, because our law enforcement officers and the administrative control of law enforcement, our police chiefs and whatnot, right? They're generals and they're soldiers, and they do what they're told. And who tells them what to do? Our state legislatures, our city councils, right? It's really the fault of the politicians. Yeah. You look at, like, here in Montana is a great example. Law enforcement can't use license plate readers. Your license plate that is in the public domain, that everybody can see, that I can put up a camera on my property and I can record every single license plate that goes by it. I can put a security camera on my property that records every single person that walks down the sidewalk. But law enforcement doesn't have the same right to use the same technology, because you have these backward law enforcement backward state legislators who don't understand how the bad guys work. So they're either not smart enough to understand how the bad guys work, or they're in on it. One of those two things is true. Yeah. So it's one or the other. So they're either not smart enough to understand how to care about the people who elected them, or they're corrupt. Yeah. There's no in between. Yeah. And that's my big problem with the way that our state legislatures are handcuffing our law enforcement teams and not allowing them to do the thing that they're supposed to do, which is to fight crime. Right. And the reason why do you ever wonder why you get so much support from the military, from all these units? Why would these guys, some of those highly trained assets in the world, flip over backwards to help you out? It's because they know that it doesn't matter how much training they have, how many guns they have, how freaking cool they are. When I was overseas deployed, right, and I did 30 combat deployments. So I was gone a lot.
Yeah. You were in it, man.
Who was protecting my mom and dad? Who was protecting my sisters?
Yeah.
Who was protecting my wife and kids?
It
was law enforcement.
Yeah, your domestic side guys.
So it doesn't matter how much training I have if I'm 6,000 miles away.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the reason why you see such a kinship between aggressive law enforcement officers and your soft units, is because they very much understand. Like, if my house catches on fire, it's that firefighter who's gonna save the people I love. If my, God forbid, my family's in a car wreck, it's that law enforcement officer who's going to show up and throw a tourniquet on and save my kid's life, right? And so that's why there's such a warmness towards those aggressive law enforcement officers. But it's also why there's such a frustration towards the lazy law enforcement officers, right? You look at the lack of physical fitness standards, the lack of shooting standards, the lack of academic standards. And then you have these law enforcement officers who are crushing it and are very aggressive, who also are frustrated with all that stuff. And so they're like, you know what, I'm out of here.
Well,
I'm not going to deal with this anymore.
Perfectly, no, you're spot on, man. And it's that we have that lazy side group in every side of the profession, sadly. Fortunately, they're a small percentage in the game warden force, at least where
you guys are hiking up and down mountains in
we're
a serious
a lot,
way.
Yeah.
Like, you got to have a certain level of aggression there.
And there's a handful that, we call them the windshield wardens. You never want to be branded as a windshield warden. You want to make that career, stand inside of the truck. I'm walking back to the truck from the shoreline. I'm getting in. I'm not hiking further than that. But, that I never looked at it that way, of why you guys were so motivated. And for me, what was so cool about working with you guys, and like I said, 7th Group, Army and Air Force primarily, until I got to know a lot of SEALs that couldn't do it, that wanted to do it, especially when I retired and getting to know Andy. And, you and I know Andy Stump. We've worked with him, and Andy's a buddy. We've done podcasts and whatnot. And a lot of other team guys that just go, you know what, man, this, as much as they fought and as much as you fought for what we have left of this great nation overseas, to see that this is happening domestically, and it's under your nose and my nose, and it's not just California foothills, it's where you and I live here, all three of us right here, in what they call the last great place left in America, Montana. God bless it, man. That's why we're here.
Yep.
Right? Granddad settled it in the 70s. Career Navy vet. Wasn't deployed in World War II to Pearl Harbor, right out of boot.
Yeah.
Cruiser sunk. He survived. A lot of his guys didn't. He did 3 wars and found this place and said, this is where I'm settling for my 9 kids, right? And all those aunts and uncles, they're either LE or they're military, That's just the world we come from. But you guys on the SF military side, you just want to get in it and help. Yeah. I mean, there's that. There's that, you want to get in and help, but you want to work with motivated cops. And when you can get into the woods in arduous conditions and get with a team like ours, or get with fellow SF guys, and now we have guys that are wired the same. And, if we die on that mountain, we die on that mountain. If it's a Silicon Valley gunfight and I die with my boots on, then I die with my boots on. It was a different level of preparing for work as a game warden when this started, and especially when we went operation with Meth with those dogs. And you guys, there was no patch, there was no military versus domestic. We didn't look at the patch. We were all mostly in multicams, or we were in dark woodsy stuff for the Fern Garden stuff. We were brothers, and that's how it worked. And I feel like, I would imagine, and I don't want to speak for you, but I would imagine working at home on, say, a grow op, say we're back in California together, you'd feel like you were making a real dent because you're at home, immediately on the environment and the public safety, because these people are right in your backyard feeding fentanyl to our kids and putting tainted weed that our kids might experiment with at a high school party, and they're ingesting carbofuran. So I felt like it was a direct effect, not removed, by going out of country, And that's what I got from a lot of my military buddies on the teams. Well, we're going to go deploy now for 6 months or a year, but I hope I'm back in a year doing counter drugs. So some of the guys got to do both, and they would end up at Moffett or Mather or whatever, which was cool. But what's your thought on that? Just
I think so you're right, and also it's like, again, those guys showed up armed. They were as ready to freaking get in a gunfight as the next guy.
Yeah.
But they were actively avoiding implementing their weapons because, right, you're walking right up against that razor's edge of posse comitatus, Executive Order 12333, and they know that. And so they're going to do absolutely everything they can to make you as the point force the most effective that you can be, and train, equip, advise. And I mean, if they got to get into it, they're going to get into it, but, and they're not going to hesitate. But boy, like overseas, you're just like, oh man, like, I hope we really get into it, right?
The gloves are off. There's
but back at home, you're like, man, clear. I really hope we don't get into it because like this is because they knew that if they engaged, right, and they're going to hit their targets, like that is predetermined. No doubt. If they engaged, I mean, you saw firsthand training the way those guys can shoot. Like
we shot with you guys. We had you guys at range days and
there's basically unlimited funding for training. But they know if they engage, they're going to be on a desk for a year while the lawyers try to sort it out. And that's why those guys were like, everything we can do to support you so that we're ready to engage, but God, we really hope we don't have to on U.S. soil. And and
it was a perfect blend because, like I said, we would have basically our apprehension team of 5 to 6 max, depending on it. With the canine, I'd be at the back of that stack. Secondary team leader would be heading up the QRF, and you guys would all be blended with those guys. And I remember, and this book goes into it, the last gunfight we had before I retired, 2017, Sierra Azul, Santa Cruz County side, same cartel cell. We called that whole area of the Santa Cruz Mountains Asshole Alley, because we were always going to get in a fist fight, knives were going to get pulled, or maybe we were going to get in a gunfight. They always fought us. They owned the mountains. It was that violent level of cell between the Silicon Valley and the Santa Cruz cutoff, and other parts of the state. You throw the guns, or they wouldn't have the guns on them. We have pretty, routine, peaceful, the kind of go home safe, kind of operation. But for the 3 years leading up to that last gunfight that happened on Sierra Azul, and I'm definitely sure at this point it was the same crew that shot my partner Warden back in 2005. But now we've regulated since then, because that was an 2005 gunfight. Now it's 2017. And Santa Cruz County sheriffs, all the law enforcement in Santa Cruz County said, it's a misdemeanor, man. We're not going to tack up and go after an outdoor cartel grow when we can do all these inspections, the low-hanging fruit in the city to find out who's regulated and a license and who's not for their 6 to 20 to 100 plants or whatever. So we as a Fish and Wildlife Met unit had to run that whole mission by ourselves. And we brought over Santa Clara's guys from the old days in another county, which is unheard of, on what are you doing in our county? Why aren't you assisting? Santa Cruz didn't want anything to do with it, but Santa Clara lent us their canine, all my guys that I worked with back in the day. We needed a ton of people. And that day, it went sideways, and, we came out okay, and the details are, in the story. But leading up to that whole ridgeline, if you will, between Cupertino, Saratoga, Santa Cruz Mountains, Loma Prieta, that whole stretch, we call it, like I said, Asshole Alley. And there was one mission where we had, thankfully, I believe we had a PJ on the mission, and we had at least 2 guys from 7th Group and as many bodies as we could muster. And the grows were spread out over 2 miles. And we were sneaking in so quiet, and the dogs were working so well. We were picking off bad guys in every grow quietly. And so we weren't burning it out. And keep in mind, these guys they hear great. They know every animal chirp. They got their escape trails. They know that terrain better than we do, no matter how much embedded we are as woodsmen, right? All of us on the military, on the domestic LE side. And so we're going along, and you guys are in the QRF, and we're pulling guys back, and I'm out of cuffs. I'm out of zip ties. My guys are. You guys are handing stuff up.
We're handing you our zip ties.
You're handing zip ties. You're covering, with your M9. It wasn't the SIG yet or whatever. And it was just, it was fantastic, man. And those days when you have that type of merger and you have enough force multiplier, that's when we tend to come out without drama. The gunfights don't happen that day. They happen when there's 6 of us.
Yeah.
And now we're pinned down, or maybe there's 10 or 12 of us, and we're all spread out, and we've got 5 trails, and the plot goes another mile where the encampment is, and now holding position and calling people up. But it's I think it gets to the message of how concerned we are for our communities, whether military, law enforcement, or whatever. And the other thing I love, and Nick, it's so cool you're in this boat too, co-hosting and getting to talk with you today. And Morgan, I always say the pen ultimately has been mightier than the sword, because I could have stayed on. I mean, I was maxed out at 50 years old. My retirement was maxed, but we knew there was a big raise coming down the pike to get pay parity for game wardens and supervisors with California Highway Patrol for the jobs we do. We were paid the lowest paid. I was kind of behind the scenes with our wardens off, our California Wildlife Officers Foundation, various political entities lobbying to get the game wardens paid. But with a book deal and the ability to go out and tell the story to hopefully maybe exercise a little bit of change and awareness and get more public and more legislatures behind our mission and way beyond weed, but the whole cartel threat, the trafficking, the stuff you're diving into so well right now, things like that, that was the mission. And the last 7 years since that happened, the awareness, although it's been an uphill battle, we don't call this the hidden war for nothing. I still get people going, oh my God, I just got wind of this, and I'm with this press group, and I can't believe, could fentanyl be in my school? And well, I never knew weed was tainted, on the black market. It's legal in my state. I thought everything's good, that type of mentality. And I think this is where we make the biggest dent right now, is by outreach and education, unbiased, raw and real podcasts, and maybe a handful of news media that's starting to come up and trying to just tell it unfiltered and not script it. But we're trying, all of us in the room, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate all you guys are doing in it.
You said something really interesting, which is you said that if I die with my boots on, then I die with my boots on, which means to me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're saying that the mission comes first, that the goal was to accomplish the mission, not to go home at the end of the night.
No, always to go home. But if Murphy's Law kicks in and we've done everything right and my number's up, sure. Just like you guys overseas, we prepped well. We had the best trauma gear. None of us dropped, our tactical proficiency. We didn't make a mistake. And we've had days like that. We've had days that things have just gone amazing operationally. And, then you find something after it's all done, a gun buried that a guy was really close to that he could have grabbed, that the canine didn't have to interdict, but it could have been a canine interdiction. And somebody may have been slightly out of position. And I go, ooh, that could have been weird. Mm-hmm. I'll never know. Mm-hmm. But fortunately, in all of the scrapes we had, with the exception of a real critical near fatal injury for my partner, and I think there were a lot of factors that kicked into that, and it wasn't equipment, preparation, training compatibility, because we really didn't have a lot of that in that first mission, but it was the individual guys doing the right thing, the trust we had in each other, the toughness of Mojo to sit there and be pissed and not be a victim, and not have the strength to hold up a 11-pound M1A M14. And now he's got his hand on his inner right thigh going for the biggest hole to try to stop his own bleeding and pull his Glock 22 and just cover himself in the team where he fell. And we do the skirmish line around him, and then pretty much we form up that 360 when it's safe to do so. I think about all those things. And being a spiritual person, I think there was a little bit,
for sure.
There was influence from upstairs.
For sure.
Because if he had died or if I had been hit or more, we're not in this game.
Yeah.
There's no way. I think our chief weathers the storm with the governor, and you stay back in your lane, go check some fishing and hunting licenses, do the environmental crime, go do what you're doing. This is not where you guys should be. But because it worked out the way it did, I think it was kind of meant to be that this issue had to get addressed. And you said it really well, and thanks for pointing that out. When you look at the data, data doesn't lie. And when we started to finally do, Nick, what you're getting towards is, I don't care where you sit on the political fence, defund the police, ramp up the border with more. Wherever you sit, you look at this data. This is fact. It's gospel. I witnessed it. I saw it. I documented it. I've had mainline press, even old, people running our press information group, deputy directors at my old agency, calling me up and saying, I just saw this report on CNN. It's inaccurate. You need to stop talking to the press. You're retired now. I'm like, excuse me? Who are you talking to?
Yeah, you're right. I am retired. I'm finally retired. Subject to the Constitution.
Yeah, so exactly. And I'm still not just, sworn to protect. In my mind, the wildlife, wildlands, and waterways and public safety, the good state of California. I'm looking at America now. I'm looking at the globe, and especially our country. And I said, there were no NDAs signed. No one said you can't talk. And this data were weekly reports that went to the governor's office every single week and got listed in a report. Well, it's not current. That was like 7 years ago. Wasn't meant to be. That's a template of what happened then. Now we're talking about other states, and we're talking about private land infiltration, where we've incentivized the cartels, because now if they have 6 plants or 6,000 plants, it's a misdemeanor. And unless you have known human trafficking and you find other felonies, they're going to get their plants destroyed in a big hoop house in Siskiyou County, below Mount Shasta, let's say, or in Santa Cruz, Santa Clara County. Are they really going to do jail time? Probably not. And we know, just like the outdoor trespass thing, when it was a felony, when they were in our national forest primarily, they're just going to go to one of their 50 other grows, and they're going to outproduce and outprofit over what Siskiyou County Sheriff is underwater in Northern California, as an example, the most pristine place left. It is completely taken over by primarily the Chinese element, because we got the Chinese and Sinaloa Cartel, which we can talk a little bit about. And they're going to run it amok, and you're going to get 4 or 5 of their grows a week, and they're going to outproduce you with hundreds, if not thousands. And, when I talked with Andy Stump last on, I think we were in person on one of the podcasts, Cleared Hot, here in Kalispell, I like the analogy that came up. He said, you know what? He goes, tactically, you guys are doing a great job. It's really cool. You're getting the information out. I'm embedded now. I'm all part of this message. It's great stuff. I mean, I'm home there, home here. We came from the same state. But he said, but at the end of the day, you're playing whack-a-mole with all these holes in a leaky dam, and you can't repair this dam anymore. You can't keep plugging the holes. We need a new dam. Mm-hmm. And that's legislation, awareness, exactly changing how we implement what we're going to prioritize, and start to see a little bit of that. But, Nick, I'm preaching the choir on this, Morgan. We got a long way to go. When you talk about laziness, when you talk about corruption issues, when you talk about this is not what I'm used to working, and I don't really want to go in this because this is going to make a lot more work for us, because one, we have to acknowledge it, that it's really going on. And when it talks to human trafficking, especially our children, domestically, and I know I might have saw that same guy in a grow site sometime.
Yep.
You never know. So to me, the fight doesn't end. I just think we do it this way now.
Well, the way I like to explain modern crime to people is it kind of happened. We saw this in terrorism first, where like you usually don't have. So when you think of a terrorist, we think of the person who blows themselves up.
Right.
That person is usually mentally ill,
right,
or they have some other issue going on,
yeah,
and they're being controlled, and like you don't really focus there. You focus on who's creating that person. You focus on who's making the vest. Or the car bomb. You focus on the points of connection within the market. Right. That's where we focus, and crime, thanks to the internet, is no longer this top-down hierarchy, Pablo Escobar-ish, right? I mean, it kind of is at the higher levels, obviously, with the cartels, but they're really the last of it that's got any type of hierarchy. For the most part, it's this loose affiliation of like minds, right? There's the documents guy, and there's the gun guy, and there's the transport guy, and right, the transport guy is moving whatever you want, and there's the trafficker who's buying his guns from this guy and his documents from this guy, and there's the narco trafficker who's buying his guns from this guy and his documents from this guy, right? And it's just like any market. Mm-hmm. And so when you and it's all for the most part run online, right? Mm-hmm. Online communications, like it's all on the internet. So when you have law enforcement that either refuses to learn the new area of operations, which is cyber, and you have state legislatures that refuse to put forward laws that allow law enforcement to use these tools, the same tools they're using for their business. Like, it's okay for them to use it to make money, but it's not okay for law enforcement to use it to protect the environment and to protect kids.
Right. Go figure.
Yeah. It's so
right.
dumb. Like it's just
this
dumb.
Equation?
And so when you have this loose affiliation of like minds, one of the things I think that a lot of people either think is a myth, or they don't understand why it's happening, is that what you talked about with the whole Chinese and cartel connection. Can you kind of explain to folks? And then I'll add the agency perspective. That'd
be really cool to get your twist on that. Yeah. And it, especially with the world you're working in, that are they're different, but they're aligned.
It's illicit commodities sold on a black market.
Exactly. The thing that was really, really weird with this Chinese Sinaloa collusion, I got wind of it from a good friend of mine, Bill Bodner, who's a recently retired SAC, special agent in charge of the LA office for DEA. And Bill was one of these guys that came on our Thin Green Line podcast, and they reached out to us. I went, wait a minute, you're still an active SAC in LA, and you can come on a podcast. And their press people, greenlit it. And Bill came on, and it was fantastic. And, he had got wind of the hidden war, the environmental side. And so what was happening with kind of some of the sanctuary state stuff and not really wanting to address the fact that we had deportable felon cartels, running primarily most of this weed trade and the human trafficking in California, Bill came out and he said, well, what we're going to start doing is take a page from your book. No one's really paying attention to the cannabis being an issue, but they'll sure pay attention to the stolen water. Mm-hmm. And I'm aware because of what you guys are, because, Fish and Game Wardens of the Met unit that I've now retired from, they're in LA working warden, massive private land, huge grow operations run by Sinaloa at the time, and starting to get the influx with the Chinese, stealing like 7.8 million gallons a day.
Whoa!
In 1, 2, or 3 counties, with these water trucks going to these hoop houses that look like the Amazon Jeff Bezos strip mall of grow houses, but instead of a distribution warehouse center like the size of the one they're building here in Kalispell, or the one I see driving back and forth the airport in Spokane, it's so many grow houses, hoop houses stacked together, it covers like a couple blocks or more, massive. And every one of these has a water truck with stolen water 24/7, hitting hydrants, hitting tribal land creeks, hitting underground aquifers, whatever. So the water is going to get people's attention for sure. California, drought state.
Right.
And it was in one of its biggest droughts since when I was operational and recently retired. We've had 200-year, event of the worst droughts ever in Cali, and the rest of many other parts of the country as well. And so the water stealing, the poisons on the cannabis, and everything else, the human trafficking element, and we started to really bond over that. And then I got wind of, he starts talking about this Chinese collusion and did an NBC story. I believe Lester Holt even was one of the interviewers for it. So it got fairly high reach from a media standpoint, and I never saw it on mainline media. He sent me links well after it was out, hit me up. We started to talk about it. We had him back on the podcast and talked more about it. And right before I got my first invite to Congress to testify in October 2023, provided me some data, and pictures of what these Chinese poisons look like now that the Chinese and the Sinaloa cartels are now in full collusion. It's not even an adversarial thing. And the way it's been explained, and I dropped this on Congress, they weren't aware of the Chinese connection. They were concerned with cartels. We know the border issue, but we're hearing about this Silicon Valley story and the environmental damage. And if it's there, it's everywhere. We want people to get past thinking it's just a border issue, an embedded issue in America, right? So that was the first congressional testimony, which really opened some eyes and drew some attention to this Chinese collusion. And basically, the way it goes, guys, is we started to see Chinese organized crime groups starting to take over where the Sinaloa Cartel primarily had been in Northern California. So Shasta County, then you get into Siskiyou County. Siskiyou County is the wild frickin' West. It's as remote, if anything remote you'd see in the timber remote area I am over the hill here, from Kalispell, or go back east to, just the High Line, the Badlands. It is remote. And the Chinese were coming in from back east, and they were working side by side with cartel grows from the Mexican cartels, and we're like, why aren't they having more scrapes? Why aren't they mixing it up? Why are they, more adversarial? This is kind of weird. Well, the Chinese wanted to get into the weed trade because of the cash money. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's not a federally, legal product, no matter regulated at the state level with cannabis. We don't have this thing. There's no digital currency on it. You can't put it in banks. You can't insure it. So it's a cash business. And the Chinese are trying to amass as much black market cash, and it's in the billions now, definitely hundreds of millions, if not the billions, to launder right here in other legal operations and amass so much wealth that there's a theory, and Bill pointed this out, that by 2035, China wants to make that the standard and take over the currency model pretty much for the world. Now, that goes beyond what I'm fighting, but that's what I was told, and that's what can possibly make some sense, and just embed them in amassing a ton of capital to possibly do that. But way before that ever happens, if that's what's going on, we have the fact that the Mexican cartels have to have their money laundered in every business they're in. And they do it mostly in America, and up until now, it's cost them 6% of every black market dollar they make. Well, the Chinese came in and said, look, we want to get into the weed trade. We don't take it over, but we want to get into that. And we'll launder your money for 5% instead of 6%. Okay, we'll try this on. And NorCal and Southern Cal, where we first started to see it way back 2018, 2019,
and they're
2020.
a nation state, so they have access to a banking system that a criminal or enterprise wouldn't have access to.
Right. And I'll bring out some more sinister aspects of it a little further into the story of who came across the border before border control started again, from the standpoint of military-aged, well-dressed Chinese males that are definitely not your, struggling, wrecked out immigrant trying to chase the American dream and coming across and being trafficked across. That's information we got to share today, because that's a real eye-opener. But I digress. So this starts going really, really well. So now more and more Chinese grows are being given to the Chinese groups and the Hmong groups in Northern California as the Sinaloa and other cartels start to say, hey, we're going to stay in the weed trade, but this fentanyl thing is really profitable. So we're going to get more into the fentanyl, and we're going to continue in human trafficking. So we're going to traffic, Hispanic immigrants, Chinese immigrants in both, and we're going to collude with our fellow Chinese transnational criminal organization, Plaza Boss type level guys, and we're going to traffic our own people that are basically minion workers for both operations. And it continued to go where, okay, now we're going to charge you 4%. Now it's 3%. And right now, the Chinese are laundering their money for $0 with the Mexican cartels. The other thing that's going on is precursor chemicals coming out of China for fentanyl and meth. The Mexican cartels need those. They need them for the super labs in Mexico and whatever they're building and cooking here in America. And we know they're doing meth at least. I'm not surprised if we have many deadly fentanyl labs. I'm sure we do. That exchange is going on too. So we started to see this so much more. And then I immersed with a really cool journalist named Jorge Ventura, young guy. He was with Daily Caller. I got to know him before I went on a show called California Insider that was Epic Times, Epic News, really raw and real, telling this story. And Jorge had gone on about a month before me, and I was sent a link to see what he was doing. He's immersed where he grew up in Palmdale, California, kind of the deserts of Los Angeles County, watching these cartels start to collude, watching it go off in these greenhouses, seeing the human trafficking. And then through COVID and civil unrest, he became a journalist, and he did 2 documentaries, Cartelville and Narcofornia. Got to know me. We hit it off. We went up and did Narcofornia together 2 years ago up in Siskiyou County, and in bed with Siskiyou County sheriffs, interview ranchers, interview farmers that literally they were on mandates for water rationing because of the drought, yet the underground aquifer had been so depleted from these private land, stacked up hoop houses, Chinese and Hmong primarily, not one Mexican cartel grow in sight, and they couldn't water their livestock. They couldn't water their crops, their personal water sources. They would get guys driving up through their gates, Asian instead of Mexican cartels, like we saw in the forest in the first story, wearing plate carriers, AKs, driving up to their gate in some big rig 4x4 and just tell the landowner, you're probably going to lose your water. Don't worry about it. Don't make an issue, and everything will be safe on your land. And then leave. And so Siskiyou County was like, I liken it to northwestern Montana. It's beautiful. It's, last of the baby boomers, farmers and ranchers, small schools, man. I mean, it's all American, middle America, what people go to those communities for. 90% of those people have left town. They moved to Montana, Oregon, Alaska. They're like, we can't deal with it. I was surrounded by ranchers, like-minded, good schools, good kids. I'm nothing but hoop houses. It's all Asian gang members. There's gunfire at night. There's, they're driving up and giving me the stink eye. I got my kids playing outside. It's like complete Mad Max up there, man. So I immersed with him, not only get interviewed for it, but to go work with my old teammates. And I had been out of operations for maybe 3-4 years at that point. Mm-hmm. guys, what I saw up there had changed so much. And my Met guys are still working. My
changed
old teammates,
so much as in it got more sophisticated?
More sophisticated and more, even to the point where they're paying cash for these properties. They're citizens, so they're getting a vote and trying to kind of manipulate the politics
for sure
of the county of Siskiyou. And you got Jeremiah LaRue, the youngest sheriff in California's history, underwater, asking the governor in California, no help there. We'll just leave it at that. Asking the last administration's president, no help there. So he's like, I'm talking to everybody. Come on, man, let's do documentaries. You've seen him on Fox News a bunch. He goes, I have so many deputies. I got a 3-hour response time if there's a gunfight on this Asian cartel grow to a citizen or, some leverage of extortion. So guys, we're not going to be able to get out there. They're hitting like 5 a week, 10 a week mostly on search warrants when we went out, to the tune of 10,000 plus grow houses in this one county. So exponentially, right?
These numbers are huge.
Yeah. They're massive. And when you look at the exchange now and you look at how efficient they are, because the Chinese are just like the Mexicans, they are vertically integrated. Mm-hmm. They're very professional.
Very bright.
They're very bright. They've got technology. They've kind of got it all. And so this is not going away. This is not getting better. And then what Jorge pointed out, and we just had him on my Thin Green Line podcast that I co-host with Wayne Saunders, retired lieutenant out of New Hampshire, Warden's Watch, and Thin Green Line are our podcasts. Jorge came on our podcast finally, and he's with News Nation now. And he's on the southern border doing a lot of great stuff down there, but he's staying on this cannabis issue. So much so that he really got back into the China collusion. And the first time it got mentioned on national news was a story I did live just last weekend, Sunday night on News Nation primetime. They asked me specifically about what's this China influx collusion and what are they doing right now? And I mean, we knew about this going on 3 years. Mm-hmm. And why it hasn't made national news and mainstream media blew my mind. And for News Nation to finally tackle that objectively and let me speak freely, and the story was good, but there's still people that aren't going to see it. And to what you and I are doing, Nick and Morgan, what we're all doing collectively as a team to educate our local Flathead County and Lincoln County and talk about Montana as a whole, we're really doing it for the nation. I look at it this way. I mean,
totally.
There's still a lot of my heart's in the old Golden State, and I still spend, a certain portion of the year fighting that fight still. But this is a sinister collusion. They're not adversarial, which really sucks. It would be kind of nice if they were. The other thing that was really crazy is, and Jorge was the first to get wind of this, when he immersed with the final year of that uncontrolled border and who was coming across. When you look at the cost, the cartels charge, say, a migrant family to come across is between $4,000 and $7,000, right? They're trafficked across. There's nothing comfortable about it. They're going to find their own rides. They got to have something set up on this side of the border. It's on them. The Chinese guys, though, come over and they are well-dressed, well-fed, very smart. They're paying $30,000 to $35,000 to get across the border because they have a flight to Ecuador first. They're going to get asylum, and then they're going to take all their documents from China, their passports, any identifying documents, and destroy them on the Mexican side of the border before they come here. We know China doesn't keep records that America's ever going to see on these people.
Right.
So good luck finding out who these individuals are. And then they have no ID. They get basically taken across the border. They're in a really good ride, set to transport, stay in a certain hotel somewhere, and it's a whole infrastructure where, as it was explained to me, even the migrants that are trying to get like a Lyft ride are looking, and here come these, pimped out taxis for the Chinese guys, and they're like, I can't get a damn ride anywhere. Where's he going? Well, it's already planned out.
Yeah.
Like you said, this happened, and all that's organized, we know, mainland.
Masters of logistics.
Masters of logistics. So I'm glad to finally be getting some attention to that. And I mean, first congressional testimony, when I mentioned that bipartisan committee and the resources committee, they went, tell us more about that. And they asked some really good questions. I did not know our legislatures were not aware of that yet. And that was like a year and a half ago. And it's been going on a long time because we've been seeing these Chinese nationals in grow sites in Northern California and Southern California since 2018, my retirement year, 2019. And then talk about pandemic for a minute and all of that mess. It was absolutely wild to see how much the cartels embraced that chaos and how we handled it in America, right? They went, okay, culture of chaos. Everyone's panicked. I talked to my team leader that replaced me, fellow sniper, great guy. Shang is his call sign in the book. I'm asking him, what's going on down there? He goes, oh, dude, it's crazy. We can't do anything. We can go scout the woods, not go in near anybody. All our guys, we're spread out strategically, individually throughout the state for the tactical unit, and we're all like scouting our areas, working with local LE assets, intel assets, military assets, ranchers, farmers, backcountry guys, whatever, finding all these grows, Sinaloa, some Chinese integrating, and for 6 to 8 months, that whole grow season of that first lockdown year, 2020? Mm-hmm. No raids. I mean, the cartels got away with murder, man.
Oh, yeah.
Criminals
in general did.
Yeah, just in general. So they thrive on that chaos, and they know how we're going to react. So, and that's really, we think, when that real stronghold happened with the Chinese and the Sinaloa primarily, just to go on steroids. They just blew it up.
Right.
And now they are immersed everywhere. And the human trafficking that you're working really hard on your side, now we've got those two adversaries, in full collusion and trafficking people for the same reason, but doing it together, for their enterprise. And it's in the billions. We know that. Trillions, actually, when you get back to the big bosses.
Yeah,
like
if you look at it globally, it's got to be in the trillions. I mean, that's just, the math just works that way.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because like the price of cannabis has tanked in California. Yeah. Since 2016, that law passed. All the boutique growers, the old hippies who are making bank in like Garberville and that area, like they can't even afford, like trimmers who would get $200 a pound. I used to do a little bit of that after I worked on the show Weed Wars, and I hear now like they pay like maybe $40 or $40 a pound. So the amount of money is probably because these cartels, these organizations have just come in and just flooded the market with terrible, bad product too.
Yeah. And to your point, Morgan, that's what people don't realize is the legitimate cannabis industry, and we're allied with legitimate cannabis in California. I had 4 or 5 tier 1 growers, that they had been outlaws before we regulated in 2016, but they said, you know what, we're going to try it. And I remember going to, I was asked to go to a panel presentation, California Growers Association meeting, where I show up in cams, I'm in my camos, I got my canine, I got the PowerPoint, I'm going to be the last in a panel of 3 or 4 to put it up. And I drive up there and I get the dog out and go sit inside, and there's 500 growers, gals, guys, they're just like, what's he doing here? He's going to look at license numbers. I know he's got something. I'm all, time out, guys. Take a breath.
I'm on your team.
Dog's going nuts.
So I'm like, my little Paulo, my little lab's like sniffing. What am I sniffing? The crazy part was, though, I told him, I said, look, the new regulation goes in effect. You got to get licensed, and we're working that all out. Fish and Wildlife, Water Board, you're going to get permits. I'm not here to bust anybody. I'm here to absolutely just put some stuff out there of the fight I think we need to unify on now, especially because you guys are, kind of coming into light, and you got nothing to do with this cartel stuff. In fact, some of those growers actually called us in as a Met team because they had cartel Sinaloa coming in on their property, taking all their water, and they go to creep in there, and they see guys with the guns. They're like, I can't even talk with them. And I got a 100-acre piece of beautiful, pristine mountain Mendocino or Lake County property, Morgan, and I've got a female with single mom with a couple of kids, and she's a legitimate DEM certified grower that is as organic as you can get, and she's got cartel gunmen running around on her property taking her water. And that was an eye-opener to me. I said, okay, we're going to unify on this. Forget this divisiveness, left, right, pro, use cannabis, don't. I said, we're going to fight a domestic evil that we all got to fight.
Exactly.
And I said, this isn't about cannabis, guys. I said, take that out of the equation. Don't demonize cannabis. Don't legitimize cannabis. Like 10 years ago, the Associated Press, I did an article. They were doing an interview, and the only quote that came out of it that people talk about, they go, dude, you were quoted as saying, if cherry tomatoes were on the black market for $4,000 a pound and tainted with toxic chemicals, we'd be getting on gunfights over tomatoes. So don't make it about chemicals. I went, I don't know why you quoted that, but whatever. I said, but that's the way to take it. You can't, you don't tell kids in an assembly when I do presentations, you really shouldn't try, don't smoke weed. I mean, it's regulated in some states. Just know what you're getting into. When I show the pictures from the book and much more in depth in a PowerPoint, I've had the legitimate growers at that meeting. It was Santa Cruz County. They were crying, women and men. And when I went back to the truck guys and I'm loading the dog and I put my stuff away, I had probably 15 growers like just power walking to the truck. And I went, oh, this is crazy. Uh-oh. Hold on, Lieutenant, hold on. What do you got? Put the dog away, kind of blade a little bit. Like, is this where it ends, man? I mean, we're not quite friends yet. They go, listen, it's total bullshit. We had no idea. Some of us have had cartels on our property that affected our trade. I haven't seen that. I run a multi-million-dollar farm in Mendo County. I'm completely legit. I've done medicinal. I'm getting all the permits. I'm ahead of the game. I have like 20 workers, 10 trucks. Send me anywhere on my dime. My crew will go reclamate. We will help you clean up.
Wow.
We will go reclamate. We totally love what you guys are about. Your Met team, you're our Earth Warriors. So that's what they named the team, Earth Warriors.
Wow.
I went, that's a different kind of name, but we'll take it.
Okay.
You know?
Very fitting for that.
And it's kind of one of those things where with the legitimate cannabis industry, it's like it used to be handcuffs and chasing them around and helicopters are running. And now it's, it's the handcuffs to hugs and handshakes. And we have to have that ally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely do in the cannabis world because like what you're fighting, Nick, it leaches so far beyond the weed trade.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not going to ever diminish environmental damage because woods are my church. It's our motto in the family going back to granddad and dad. And wildlife being destroyed is something, I'll fight for any day. I mean, we have so much depleted open space. Even we see this in Montana. And, not to have wildlife species for hunting or not, or just conservation to enjoy the outdoors for our next generation, right? That's a fight worth fighting. And now to know that this public safety thing is all roped into the same environmental criminal makes it pretty universal, even if you're an urbanite in city of Silicon Valley, or you're down in Bozeman, or you're down in LA. Everybody can agree poison water sucks, dead deer, dead wildlife, no one wants to see it. So that's where we're getting the, kind of the unified fight with the legitimate growers in every state. And sadly, so many states, guys, are regulating the same way California did. Oklahoma did it. The Chinese have moved into Oklahoma. DEA, the latest, and what stemmed that News Nation report we did the other night was DEA's drug threat assessment for 2025 said cannabis trade being run completely by collusion between Mexican cartels and Chinese organized crime. It actually came out in their 2025 report. So that was gospel for them to actually acknowledge that, to get that out there. When we've had wind of it for a while, but DEA is looking at that now a lot. And I think Bill had a lot to do with that because he saw the collusion and he was on his way out like I was. He just retired later. And I really like it that a DEA on the Fed side would really take an interest in the environment and realize that's how you attack this thing. You don't attack the drug, you don't attack the substance, you attack the damage it's doing beyond just a regulation statute or beyond public safety. Look at it comprehensively. So it's something we can look at and we can promote together.
That's great.
On the widest span, yeah.
It's amazing to see like just the connections. I mean, I feel like this is really a conversation about connections as much as anything, because a lot of things we talk about is the reason why I was so excited to talk about California as a case example is just because I'm from there originally and just I love that state so much. But so often I feel like in America, it's other states are like, it might as well be a different country because we look at it as like it's an over there problem, something you say a lot.
Right.
But it's not. And it's like a lot of what's happening in California directs Montana, affects Florida, whatnot. So we've started in California and now we're starting to see, and this isn't even like public knowledge as much as I feel like it should be, is that the cartels are infiltrating the reservations of Montana. How does that story start, and why are there cartels embedded in Montana? And what is that?
Yeah, this one was, you kind of feel like, the evil over your shoulder follows you, from the West Coast, and it followed me to Montana, it followed you to Montana. But it wasn't the case, man. It's been going on for many years, and I got wind of it through an article. I can't remember if it was a print article online that talked about this massive shift. And what really got everybody's attention was, again, the last great place in America is now infiltrated by the Mexican cartels and basically eroding communities in our Native American tribal nation communities. And I'm like, whoa, where, why, how is this happening? I mean, we're so low populated even in how much money can they be making off fentanyl pills and what human trafficking is going on, especially when they were mentioning east of here, the very rural, wide open tracts of impoverished Crow, Cheyenne, different Indian.
Rocky Boys got hit real hard with it.
Yeah, they got hit really hard. And what we learned is because of some of the addiction issues on tribal lands in nature, there were already fentanyl distributors to a low level at the local, getting some of this stuff probably from the Mexican cartels, but they weren't cartel dealers. And then Sinaloa realized, okay, we're making about $5 a pill in San Jose, California, LA, Chicago. But up there, we have a demand, because fentanyl's just in demand everywhere, you know, in the kids all the way up to guys our age and beyond. It's $100 because it's so hard to get to those remote areas.
Supply and demand.
Supply and demand, like what you got back to in the beginning, Nick. So Sinaloa sent up their biggest distributors with a couple of, you know, some strongmen to strong-arm people, and they started to get to know these dealers. They started to befriend these dealers. They started to supply these dealers, and then they just took it over. They came in strong and took it over and started to go in harder on these communities where they get the fentanyl distributed. You'd have addiction, you'd have deaths, so much that families were losing their houses, their guns, their personal possessions to Sinaloa. And those cartel guys were literally taking their stuff and driving it back to Mexico to have more cars, more guns for their trade war, whatever they were doing, and leaving these communities just completely decimated. And two reasons, Morgan, to your point, why are they coming into a place like this and why are they doing that? One, I've worked with tribal police for years. One of the coolest, I think, privileges we ever got to do when we started the marijuana enforcement team, and it started around Operation Pristine that I mentioned before, 2013, 2014, is we got a request letter officially from the Hoopa tribe and the Yurok tribes in California saying, hey, we understand you're a conservation agency, but you're a law enforcement team that specializes in this, and we'd like to bring back that relationship between domestic law enforcement and tribal nation, Bureau of Indian Affairs police officers work together. We're up here in, you know, Humboldt County. We're up here on the Trinity River. We have so many grow sites from the cartel all around us. We can't possibly handle it. Water is depleted. You know, we're days away from turning on the tap and not having drinking water. And not to mention those creeks or those streams and those rivers have, you know, the salmon. And that's basically a ceremonial fish, you know, for these tribes. And now it's carbofurans going into it. You know, their fisheries are being depleted. So we actually embedded with them as well. And we learned a ton. And we brought back that relationship that had been gone for so many hundreds of years because it came down to an environmental fight. And what we learned then is the cartels are going to go there because there's nobody to fight them. And because of the boundary disputes, we can't come in without memorandums of understanding to work on tribal lands, even on the forest. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to necessarily work with us. And I mean, hunting seasons that we have right around their borders don't apply to tribal lands. They are their own government. They are their own entity, you know? And when you look at that, the cartels go, well, that's really easy to leverage.
Yeah.
Because I thought game wardens were scarce. And what I had to cover, 2 tribal policemen for like 500,000 square miles, and you're going, what the heck are they going to do?
Yeah.
And Montana tribal nations are even more remote than Northern California tribal nations, so it just made perfect sense for these fools to come up, you know, embed in those communities, destroy those communities, and really have little, if any, impact on them. And when this got exposed, it really got to kind of the core of nobody in America is immune to this impact. Right.
Well, and the data supports everything that you just said, because like here we are in Montana. You just said like we have, I mean, in every possible way that you can compare us with where you came from in California, we are smaller.
Yeah.
From a GDP perspective to a income per capita perspective to a person per acre perspective.
Overall population, you know, number of law enforcement officers,
every way
all
we
of
are
it,
smaller. And so what the data shows is that, as an example, one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a Native woman is the state of Montana.
Yeah.
Like those are, yes, are they natives? 100%. But they're Montanans.
Yeah.
There are Montana brothers and sisters.
Absolutely.
They're no different than, you know, anybody who lives in Billings or Bozeman, or they just happen to live in Browning, or you know, wherever they are. Like there are brothers and sisters as Montanans, and so if that is happening to our native, predominantly woman population, right, to the women and girls, what else is happening that there's no possible way that they could report on? Because at least when you have somebody goes missing, somebody is going to pay attention to the fact that somebody went missing. Like somebody cares about that human, for the most part. But if you've got some back 100,000 acre piece of property that nobody's been on for 20 years, that's, you know, part of a reservation, and there's some back road in, and you've got a member of the tribe who's involved in it. How are you even going to detect that? Much less actually do anything about it.
So you and I've had some interesting conversations about how do the reservations or the Montana state, how do we combat what is going in and out of reservations? And can you talk about like what is an advantage to a reservation that could actually have an impact for countering some of this activity?
Good question.
If any of our politicians are actually interested in solving this, I can solve this for them inside of 90 days for less than a few $1 million. So
explain. That's a huge claim.
It's a huge claim. So,
but it's a encouraging claim. I want to hear this.
So in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, other places, we dealt with a lot of tribal issues, and tribes are tribes, right? In America, among the non-tribal population, we tend to call the tribes Democrats or Republicans, right? Christians or atheists, right? Like those are tribes. Like they're not tribes based on like bloodlines. They're tribes based on, you know, beliefs. The only difference is that when you have tribes that are based on bloodlines, that are based on you know, historical heritage and culture. You see the same thing in Iraq that you would see in, say, anywhere in Montana. And the thing that tribes have is that everybody knows what's going on in the tribe. So the best example of this is in Iraq. You had what's called the Al Anbar awakening, right? Everybody's heard about that on the news, and it was part of the surge and all that stuff. And the point of the Al Anbar, like when you look at Al Anbar province, I mean, you think that like places in eastern Montana are rural. Oh no, they are booming metropolises compared to these places. I mean, these are just Bedouin, like just Bedouin tribal communities for the most part in Al Anbar. But the reason why that was so important is because of that rural connection. Everybody knew what was going on. So all we had to do was get the tribal chiefs and AKA warlords in the area to say, okay, in our square that we call Al Anbar in this province, we are not going to allow any bad guys here. That's it. We're just not going to do it. And they knew how to funnel them. Like they like if they want to take control of their property, they can. They know it. They know it better than anybody. And I saw this firsthand. I went to this. I can't say the name of it, but I went to this tracking school. You might have heard of it.
TTOS?
It's run by a Native American tribe in the southern United States.
Okay.
It's invite only. It's pretty quiet.
Yeah.
But this tribe, these Native American trackers, they can track you across like if you swim across a lake, they're going to track you.
They're going to find you.
It's nuts.
They can see the water down
there. And they work with law enforcement very closely on the border. And I had the privilege of going to one of their training courses, and it was a week long of just living under a bush. But what I saw was that they can know what happens on their reservation, and this training course happens on a reservation. They can know what happens on their land and on their reservation anytime they want to know. Like they actually have full control of it.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting about our reservations is they also have full autonomy. They don't have to go ask the county sheriff if they want to do something.
Yeah, it's anything
they don't
goes.
have to ask the state if they want to do something. As long as they're not violating the U.S. Constitution, they can do it because they said they can.
Yeah.
So
that's a lot of freedom.
There's an opportunity for them to very cheaply implement technologies, very similar to the way that we did in the War on Terror, to funnel the bad guys in the place we want. Now, in the Al Anbar Awakening, we funneled them into a place called Fallujah.
Nice.
You know the outcome.
We know Fallujah.
Right?
We know what happened there.
And I spent a decent amount of time in and out of Fallujah, and so I got to watch all of this work. it would be so much easier to do it here in the United States of America. To just go to the tribes and just say, hey, look, here's what we like. We're not telling you what to do. We're just saying that
this is what would work. Here's
some really good best practices.
Yeah.
And it not only does it solve this cartel issue, it solves the MMIP issue. It provides a lot of data towards that, and it gives them autonomy. Because the other thing that I learned in dealing with tribes around the world is the last thing any tribal people want is a bunch of white dudes showing up telling them what to do. Like they've seen that movie.
It's very delicate with those initial conversations,
right?
When you start to immerse,
So instead, it's just like, hey, we're just telling you what has worked in other places. You might want to give this a try, or you don't. But that the autonomy is really where it's at, and so they have the opportunity to make, if they want, they have the opportunity to turn the reservations into the hard stop for criminals. And that's why I say it's so easy to deal with this, because what did we do in Iraq? We found every single person. We did this in Afghanistan. We did this in Libya. We found every single politician, tribal elder who were blocking what were just common sense initiatives to provide basic protections for children. And when they self-identified by blocking this stuff, I was like, awesome. Now we know who the enemy is.
Yeah, we got you.
And now we know who to replace.
Yeah. That's
so
cool.
Then why, I mean, this is a nonpartisan issue.
Completely.
Then why is it so hard? Because it's like, I feel like the issue of cartels infiltrating America is like one of the scariest things that was campaigned on, that we understand is happening at the border. Supposedly, they're here. We know they're here. But why isn't this a bigger issue? Like, why isn't at the state level, even like we're Montana being Montana, I feel like you don't even hear about what are the efforts to work with the tribes to combat so it's like new generation Jalisco Cartel is like the big one that's here. And so they're not just embedding to sell, they're also, I believe, distributing from the reservations is like a great spot. Like, why isn't there any effort being put into this? Like, I don't get it. Maybe there is. It just seems like it's not. I mean, I guess it goes back to what you're talking about, but it just seems like people should be like literally up in arms about this, because you could get shot by a cartel member anywhere in the country right now.
You absolutely
not
can.
to fearmonger,
but no. And I think Nick, you brought up a really good point when you say, where people sit through the politics of it, and I call it the mealy mouth, wishy-washy. Well, we don't. Until you define this thing as a national priority and basically an attack on our children and our adults, and basically what we're doing so far and what's being stated so far with the new administration, they're stepping in that direction. But each governor, where do they sit? How much state power over the federal mandate right now? And I think it comes down to having a really good governor. I think in Montana, I can tell you it's apples and oranges compared to my days in California.
Sure.
I mean,
totally.
We don't even have to go any further than that. And I don't think there's any doubt that politically there's commitment at the governor's level here in Montana, and definitely at the Washington's level to support states like Montana. I think it's going to come to a lot of funding issues, especially in this state.
Which is the state legislature.
Exactly.
That's not on the governor. That's on the state legislature.
Yep. And to that point, that becomes the hot button item in our Congress here in this state, and it becomes a priority, and they fund it. And they fund it beyond just law enforcement responses. They fund it just below logistics. They do intel. They do what Nick's doing. They do what your technology and what you're doing with your service can help not only Montana, but I think the rest of the country. And I really think I've noticed this whole hidden more thing. When you go too far down the rabbit hole, you get a blank response. People start to tune out because it just gets darker and darker and darker, because it's already dark to think about poison weed in the woods, in our states. Well, wait a minute. These guys are doing the fentanyl that killed 70-something thousand Americans last year. I mean, we lost 55,000 in Vietnam in 10 years, and 77,000 a year died from this cartel-generated drug. And some of those were kids, I mean,
It's creating a one mistake culture for kids.
Yeah.
Because kids, especially teenage kids, are going to do dumb things.
Yeah.
We can't solve that problem. Thank God phones and phone cameras did not exist when I was growing up, because those secrets will die with me.
Oh, I'm with you.
But
technology would have been just,
It's so much harder to be a teenager today, because a teenager in my day who experimented with some drugs maybe had some consequences, maybe didn't. Today, you routinely hear these stories about the teenager who buys or who gets the drug from their friend laced with fentanyl, their very first time trying to do something like this, and they're dead.
Yep.
And or they reach levels of addiction that they can't combat. And so we have to realize that this isn't the 1970s, 80s, 90s, even early double aughts. It's a completely different playing field.
Agreed.
And it's also a completely different game. And so unless we are willing to actually put resources there, I say this a lot, right? The Bible says that where your heart is, your money will be also. So when we have members of the state legislature who are more interested in funding a road improvement than they are in law enforcement's ability to tackle child sex trafficking, law enforcement's ability to combat fentanyl, to help the tribes be able to deal with this, and I actually think it's more sinister than this issue, what you were talking about, and why don't we have the state legislature? Because it's not the governor, because the governor of Montana, the attorney general have done a great job, but the attorney general, I know, put in for a bill to get more funding to fight human trafficking, and the state legislature cut it in half. So really, you didn't fund the ability to combat child sex trafficking in America? Like, shame on you. I don't care if you were right or left. I don't care who you are.
Humanity.
Like, shame on you
for a violation of humanity.
There is no reasonable argument. If there is even one child being trafficked in the state of Montana, there is no reasonable argument to reduce the funding for that capacity
on any level.
And so and I think it's the same thing with these environmental crimes that are being created by these cartel members and by these grows. So we just have to decide, us as a constituency, we have to decide, are we going to or are we not going to hold these politicians accountable? It's not up to the federal government, it's up to our state. The governor, the attorney general, they don't control the purse strings. It's the state legislature. And unfortunately, what you see more and more of in the Montana state legislature is state representatives who, quite frankly, won't get off Instagram long enough to actually understand how these technologies work and how law enforcement is just being railroaded, and then handcuff law enforcement to the point that they can't actually fight any of these crimes, which again goes back to one of two things is true. They're either in on it, they're either corrupt, or they are not interested in protecting the kids of our state. There's no gray area in between on these types of issues.
It's a black or white. I mean, I agree with you, Nick, 100%. And that money should be nothing but a priority and prioritized, and especially on the education level, I think, of kids. Parents should be educating their kids. We should be educating kids, or school assemblies or whatever, and bringing this into a stopgap. We got to put law enforcement at it. We know that. We got to put intel at it to find these rings and shut them down. But I just don't see a lot of that happening in any state to a level that it deserves, and even in Montana. And I get it, but we've definitely boomed economically. We've seen what's happened to property, amounts. We've seen what has happened to values of everything in Montana with an influx and just a boom. Look at Bozeman, look at other parts. So I would think we could find it in our legislative budget to make it somewhat of a priority to do just what we're discussing today, but it seems to come down to the same politics I saw in California. If there's not a personal gain in it from a particular member in that government entity, in that legislative branch or whatever, or in Congress, you get stonewalled. And that tells me that they're not, it's not hitting them in the heart like it is us, or politics are playing into it. And that's not the person we want there. And it's just apples and oranges.
That's a good point. And I think, we should give a shout out to the governor because he did just sign that bill that gives funding to Lake County sheriffs and tribal police, which is like the Salish Kootenai reservation in between Lake County, Flathead County, which is a massive corridor.
I did not know
they just passed it. It's $250,000 this summer, and then $1.2 million in funding so that the tribes can also issue charges for federal crimes that take place on the reservations. Awesome. And I feel like that's like a huge crux of the issue is funding and also working in better tandem with the tribes. Because
it is such a breath of fresh air, to be a Montana resident now, and deal with Governor G.M. Forte and just see where he sits and how just protective of our populace, protective of our citizens,
Yep.
And I think that's translated where we finally see that on the federal level, but every individual state is going to have to kind of play catch up or get congruent. I want to see these paralleled, and I want to see the hidden war, lit up like a Christmas tree, man. Let's expose this thing. Let's take it, let's shed some light. Let's take it out of the dark. And everything we're doing is, if you think about your child disappearing, your wife, your girl, whatever. You think about losing a family member to fentanyl, to being trafficked at a young age into another state, another country, or whatever. And if you know it can happen to you, if you know it can happen to any of us, how can you not care enough to not prioritize it? And one, do your due diligence as a parent, as a brother, as a sister, as an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, whatever, to have those conversations, get the tools in front of your family members so they can take preemptive steps.
Right.
From an interdiction, from an abduction, from being exposed to a tainted pill, trying cannabis that could have come from a non-credited source, and be full of carbofuran or some Chinese chemical I can't even read on, Chinese lettering coming from mainland.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think we're starting to get there, man. And talking about it today here on your show, whoever's going to watch this, and I'll certainly network it with my followers and everything else to realize, hey, here we are in Whitefish, Montana. This reminds me of a much more pristine mountainous community of the Silicon Valley of California.
Oh,
right. The Silicon Valley has wealth, affluence, has innovation, has think outside the box. That's probably why I was a thorn in the side of all my chiefs, because I was the idea guy and the Met thing, because I come from that culture, and I think you need that. And I think we need a little, of that mentality where those of us in the urban populated centers of Montana, can actually do something good from the city, which is oxymoronic when you think about it, but it's true, because this is where we're going to have the fentanyl problem. This is where these are going to happen. And then they're going to happen on a remote reservation that, as Nick said, looks more remote than any of the national parks or anywhere we're going to go. If I'm in the cabinets tomorrow hiking to a high lake and don't see a soul for 10 miles, we have even more remote and cut off, lack of supported lands just east of us a couple of hours where we sit today. So to your point, that's what we got to handle, and that's what we got to hit. So it's on all of us.
It is. And I think this is such a nonpartisan issue where it's like, it's almost, we do have to focus on our communities, and like there's so much division on both sides, but this is how we can protect our communities is have these conversations. If you're left, have the conversations with your right neighbors and vice versa, and find those commonalities, because the division is only going to help fuel these criminal enterprises to be emboldened.
Yep.
And to find who's the most vulnerable in the communities and what are the most vulnerable geological spots in our country.
Spot on.
So
you absolutely nailed it with that. So moving forward, that's what we're going to do. And like you and I, Nick, have all talked about earlier in the hour, I mean, we're all committed to it. And I put this out, to any of my people that follow me on social media, want to get on the website. If you have a question related to some of the dangers out there, if you want to be a game warden, if you want to learn more about conservation, don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, awesome.
And that goes for our politicians. It goes for the governor. I know we're talking about doing a panel. You had discussed earlier possibly doing a panel in August.
Yeah, maybe later this summer we're working on putting something together.
That would be fantastic. I think if we could get on a panel and collectively tell some experiences and look at what the issues are, and not so much in a negative light, but in an empowering light, right? A force multiplier with our community here in Whitefish, and we can take that out to Kalispell.
Yep.
Northwestern Montana has a very unique element because we're a little more remote. and we're a little more hidden because of our geography and our heavy mountains and the mountainous timber and everything here, that the trafficking coming off the northern border, which we haven't discussed yet, which I will bring up right now, because a lot of my Border Patrol agents and friends, and some of the guys up here that we know that are based out of this area, what have we seen with that, hard war on the terrorism cartels on the southern border? We're locking the southern border up pretty tight.
Right.
98% contained. But we do know there's an influx right up here, the Roosevelt port, that check station. Any of those areas on the Alberta border push fentanyl right through Sinaloa. No problem. This is a very remote place to cross. We don't have a ton of staff up here. We're spread out more. So it's kind of like the southern border before it got a lot of attention. And we have to watch that. And now, ironically, I was very close to it in California, and now I'm even closer to it, as are you, sitting here in Whitefish, or if I'm over in Lincoln County, and I'm 25 miles, from potentially a trafficker bringing fentanyl or anything else on the Mexican or Chinese side through my backyard, literally. So this affects us here in Flathead County, Lincoln County, northwestern Montana, very deeply. And this is something that we can concentrate some efforts on, which I'm looking forward to doing with you guys. And kudos for bringing that up and helping perpetuate that message and that idea.
That's what I worry about, though. Like, you bring up the northern border, and I think as an American, one of the things we do not do well is preempt. I feel like we react once something has already happened.
Reactive, not proactive.
So how do we become more proactive with the northern border, which is a daunting task? I mean, the southern border is the southern border, but that northern range from Washington all the way to the Great Lakes is very wide and open, and you can't really do a wall there.
You can't do a wall, but the thing is, there's so much technology with drones and sensors and cameras and satellites. I mean, there is technology now that really makes it a force multiplier for the daunting task of just geographical specifics, and that span you're talking about, how many thousands of miles it is. But we've seen it work on the southern border when there's a commitment to it, and there's really no reason to kind of follow suit with the current administration that the northern border has to be shored up as much as possible.
Right.
Sans putting a wall up through timber country. That's just not going to work. But you can put personnel in places. You can make some good response teams to handle certain things that need it, especially from a border agent standpoint, with local law enforcement. And up here, so many more people are skilled in the woods. So many people are out there roaming around, scouting all times of the year, even in snow country, right? Even in our dead of winter, whether it's backcountry skiers or snowshoers or, snow machine folks. And really, this goes so far beyond law enforcement being good eyes and ears. As a game warden, we had the Cal Tip, turn in a poacher, 1-800 turn in a poacher. Every state has it. For us, it was called the Cal Tip in California. And the cool thing about that was 80% of my best cases, and by the end of my career, 80% of illegal grows that were either on private land or public land were being turned in by outdoor enthusiasts.
Amazing.
You and me and our producer and Nick and our families that love spending time in the outdoors. That's why we live in this great state. The woods are all of our church, right? And with that, brother, we eyes and ears, a cell phone or a sat phone.
Yep.
Force multiplier, you don't have to engage.
Yep.
You don't have to make a contact. You don't have to put yourself in any danger. But now we have the technology to inform, to make good observations of what that person looked like. Maybe they went to a vehicle. Maybe I got a picture that I can blow up and get a license plate off of that I didn't because I didn't have a cell phone with that kind of technology before. Oh, I'm in a dead zone because I'm in the Yak Wilderness. Oh, now my iPhone connects to satellite,
right,
to Starlink, and I've already texted out to test that a couple of times. So my inReach that I take, my Garmin, which has to go everywhere because 90% of the places I go, I don't have cell service and I'm alone. Now we can communicate with authorities, and we have air assets.
Geolocation.
So I do believe we could contain this northern border with resources and with commitment from the public and federal, state, and local law enforcement entities, and military assets that can work, like we were talking with Nick on counter drug. We have military National Guard assets and other military assets on the southern border right now because of the definition of these traffickers. They fit the definition of terrorists. Doesn't mean we're going to go to war with them on the border with SEAL teams, but it does mean we can take those equipment, those tools, those personnel to be eyes and ears and an apprehension force, or embed with or give the information to our local law enforcement that would do the apprehension, primarily Borders and Customs Protection and Border Patrol agents. And I do know, and I know you've probably seen this, I've never seen so much morale boost and positives coming on social media from Border Protection and Border Control right now. And Border Patrol, it's crazy. With the change, I mean, they were so demoralized, and Jorge Ventura talked about this from working with them on the southern border, the journalist I mentioned before. He said there was so much depression. There was so much, hopelessness. Some agents didn't even want to be awake because they felt like basically legitimized human traffickers of how they were processing illegal border crossings, individuals, knowing that they were going to embed and go to a court date for residency or whatever in 27 or 28 if that ever happened. I mean, it was such a scam what happened the last 4 years. And now you see the immediate shift and this enthusiasm and this concern, and I think a little bit of confidence. A lot of growth in confidence in the American public because it starts here. And all the issues were devised on politically. I put them all secondary, tertiary to border security, making sure our American children are as safe as they possibly can be and can, have the likelihood of having a safe life in this amazing, amazing country. Because we still have so much we can protect and so much we can bring back. So,
and we got to protect our national land.
Absolutely do.
I mean, like you said, that is sacred ground.
It's sacred ground, and it's dwindling, right? And we have more of it up here than pretty much anywhere. We have some of it in my old state of California, but I look at the private land ranches in states that don't have a lot of public land, but at least on some of these agricultural operations, there's a bunch of wildlife positives. There's a bunch of conservation going on around the cattle industry, and why everybody can't go on these cattle ranches. The wildlife bordering all those ranches do benefit. The open spaces. I'll take Silicon Valley again, a lot of preservationist mindset, but still, at least you're taking wildlands, protecting those, those aquatics, plants, waterway species, mammals, for everybody to enjoy that the public can go on any time. And if you're not a conservation property, fine, be a preservation property, but make it available to everybody. Because I know one thing that happened through COVID. If I hadn't been able to leave the West Coast where I was working when the pandemic broke out and lockdowns started and get back home to the peacefulness of a community that had each other's backs and weren't running around in panic, and had the wildlife, had literally national forests, which I live next to, and have that surrounded, that's just hope, confidence, antidepressant, that you don't have to put in your mouth, just go out and breathe the air, right? That really, really got us through. In fact, the coolest thing about, we talk about our love for these open spaces, is when the pandemic lockdowns happened and so many people had to go indoors, especially in the cities, suicide, drug addiction, alcohol abuse, utter depression. Basically, we were demoralized. We were basically getting our asses kicked as a nation without any enemy having to fire a shot.
Right.
Whether it be China, Mexico, the collusion, whoever you want to put the blame on. But then everyone started going outdoors and going to lakes they had never gone to because they weren't really outdoory. Or they started to fish or hike a fishing trail. Or they went, I might not be able to, the food chain might run out, right? The supply chain might go whack any moment. I'm seeing what's happening with these empty shelves in Costco. I didn't really want to have a gun. I don't believe in it, but maybe I'm going to get a rifle, get a little training in case I have to feed the family.
Right.
And I'm going to take a hunter education class, even though I never wanted to hunt before, but maybe I might not have a choice. And we saw a 40% increase in the number of hunter safety class programs online going on in every state. California, my podcast partner Wayne over in New Hampshire, everywhere in between. We saw an increase in self-sustainability, wanting to be able to defend themselves. And if that meant they had to have ethical and legal ownership of firearms, they were going to do it. And they could provide for the family if the supply chain broke and they had to harvest their own protein, So when you look at all those collective things, that's where we're going to find our healing, and that's where we're going to find our strength, is in the 3 Ws: wildlife, wildlands, and waterways, brother. I don't know any other way to say it.
Wow.
And you know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's no joke how much nature heals and how much nature brings us together. So I'm glad we're talking about that twist on the crimes, because it's a very, very important part to the public safety element. All of these cartel threats we're talking about in Montana, California, and embedded throughout the rest of the country, how important all of that is for every American.
On that note, the only final question I'm going to ask is, what are you carrying when you go into the backcountry?
Oh man!
Besides bear spray, what's your
or
do you just do bear spray?
I'm not a bear spray kind of guy.
Yeah,
I'm not a bear spray. It's 50-50, and for people that aren't trained in firearms, get bear spray. By 100%. But here's the thing: I have now. If let's say I'm anywhere around my remote backcountry areas over the hill in Lincoln County.
Yep.
If I know I'm going into brown bear country, I have a titanium model Smith & Wesson revolver, 44 Magnum.
Okay.
With bonded rounds. I'm a hand loader and a ballistician, and from the whole sniper thing, I do a lot of long range rifle stuff too. But to have that handgun in bear country and hope to never have to use it, I'll use that. If I'm not likely to encounter a big brown bear that could be aggressive or not, my everyday carry gun right now, Glock's been with me forever. I carried 3 different Glocks for 3 different decades.
Yep.
We do 40 caliber. Every 10 years we got new guns. I'm an armor for Glock. And right now I'm running the Glock 48 Koa, which is, the subcompact, but it can be made high capacity, fairly compact, concealable. But with the Aimpoint Koa, Streamlight's a light sponsor for me on the tactical line, and I got a 1,000 lumen little tiny the TLR7 sub.
Yep, I have that one.
You know that one.
Oh yeah,
it's a great little.
I've got that on my Glock 19.
Perfect.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, that is the perfect little light to go with a little red dot. And then I put those shields, which, a company right here in Montana that make a metal 15-round magazine for the 10-round magazine that goes in the Glock 48, and 43s and all of that. And so now I have a high-capacity carry gun with bonded rounds that can handle pretty much anything you're going to run across. If you had to hunt, heaven forbid you had to defend yourself from a 2-legged predator or any of that. But it's so lightweight on a Kydex holster that I'm climbing, I'm, bouldering a little bit, I'm, chest deep in water on lakes I'm fishing, and going off trail when you have to get to certain little inlets, to fish and stuff like that. And I'm just real happy with it. But I will say a lot of good things about anything from SIG. I carried Glocks, so I still carry Glocks, but I have some SIGs in the arsenal. SIG's making a fantastic compact pistol, the 365 series. They've had a couple issues on some of the guns, which they're repairing, but by and large,
saw that.
By and large, a great platform, and there's a lot of other ones out there. But I still teach private defensive pistol, carbine, rifle, intro to hunting classes when I can in both California and Montana. I get to teach about 4 classes a year, up to 4 people, but I usually teach 1 or 2 because they want that personalized training to what they need. And those are one of the 2 handguns I recommend: a good SIG or a good Glock in 9mm that fits you well. It's not going to recoil too much. You're going to enjoy shooting it. They learn very quickly. That's long-windedly, those are the handguns I'll run. And if we're really going into dangerous bear country, a 12-gauge shotgun, the Benelli M4 might have to go in there with heavy loads. Usually avoid those spots because that's a lot of gun to carry around if you're even trying to just go fishing or you're going in for a hunt or whatever. So how about you?
I'm a Glock guy also. I mean, when I'm kind of like one of those guys before I started working with Nick, I just, a shotgun, rifle, just go shoot it with my dad or whatever. And then I was like, you know a lot about firearms. Like, if I was to get something, what should I get into? He's like, well, do you want a pistol or a rifle? I'm like, both. And then that just opened up a long journey that now has me in doing Steel Challenge, USPSA.
Really?
Oh, totally.
Nice. Okay, you're on it, dude.
Right now, Glock 19 Gen 5, I put a Radiant Ramjet on there.
Awesome.
Tricked it out because I was like, why not? I'm a camera guy, so let's trick it out.
Yeah.
And then I did go with an FN 510 for my carry for if I'm in the backcountry.
Nice.
We're just picking huckleberries because what's cool about that one is the tactical one is they made a threaded barrel so you can put a compensator on it. So it's 10 mil with a compensator that actually shoots pretty flat. Yeah. And it's got a 22 round mag plus 1. So it's like you can carry a lot of rounds in it.
It's a
so
great,
just put it in a chest holster.
gun system,
So that way it's like, God forbid I do bear spray, but worst case scenario, it's like you can get that out and get a lot of rounds out really quick.
Yeah.
So if you're close, because it's like once the bears can
move,
cover a lot of ground pretty quickly. So my logic is I'd rather be able to get a lot of rounds out quick.
Yep.
And then for my competition, I just got a Bull Armory Tac Pro 5-inch. So it's a 1911 double stack.
Yeah.
Amazing. Kind of like a staccato, but a lot more affordable.
I'm familiar. Yeah, they're good pistols.
And it's ported, V8 porting, so that thing shoots flat. And so that's my competition gun.
That's freaking cool, man. It's interesting. EPSC and Steel Challenge. My dad was a big IPSC competitor. He's part of the Cabinet Mountains Pistol Club, over out of Libby. And so when I got a Glock issued as a game warden, a Glock Model 22, like the first year the Glock Model 22 was launched, California Highway Patrol were all running the double stacked, 4006 styles, the metal pistols, steel, heavy, decocking, double single action combination.
Right.
And our agency went radical for game wardens, and the firearms committee picked the Glock, and everyone thought we were nuts.
Oh, but that's so just...
And my dad being a diehard 1911 guy.
Yeah.
And I inherited a Series 70 Gold Cup, completely tricked, 2 of them.
Nice.
When he passed, right, he was religious. I will never not compete with a 1911. That's my gun. And so he always did. And he said, if you come, do a match with me, you can do, open class law enforcement. I'm a B shooter. The father and son combination was something we had never done before.
Okay.
Until after I was operational. So I came up in the first match. I shot his stainless Series 70 Gold Cup and did pretty well. And we both trophied. That was a moment.
Awesome.
I said, but Dad, listen, I shot well comparatively, but I didn't shoot as well as I shoot with my Glock 22. Because again, you got a 15 round capacity. And even though it's a 40 and barks a little more than the 9, I just knew it because I shot so many hundreds of thousands of rounds through this thing. And so he said, that's combat Tupperware, that's terrorist gun, blah, blah, blah. And then of course he shot it and went, and we get our shooting skills from my dad before we're ever trained. He was state champion in California on trap and skeet.
Wow.
Olympic backup. Pretty much anything that fired a projectile, he was really good at. Kind of runs in my dad and uncle's side through my granddad. But he shot that Glock, and he went, oh my gosh. He goes, this thing truly shoots sweet, dude. I can see how reliable and bulletproof it is. I said, for work and everything, I'll give you a pass. Awesome. So the next match we did the following summer, he shot his 1911. I shot my Glock. We both, won trophies in our class.
Nice.
And it was just great. It was great to be, running the 1911 and then go into the Glock platform and seeing that Browning derivative action be in both guns, but be so different with technology and advances. But ultimately, man, my heart's with you.
Yeah.
When it comes to competition, there's just a near and dear. I'll never part with those 1911s I have in the safe, and I take them out periodically.
Nice.
And I go run drills.
Right.
And they're way heavier and they're way different. But you know what, man? It's like a fish jumping back in water.
Well, John, where can people find you and get your book, Hidden War, which I've read? It's an amazingly exciting book. Can't recommend it enough. It's really eye-opening. I mean, the way these ops run out, it sounds like you're in like a Colombian jungle, but you're just like right outside of San Jose, California.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Fighting cartels.
Yeah, and this book gets to go into the depth of California, all the way into the high Sierras, like where Lone Pine and Mount Whitney is, that glacier, above Alpine, above timber, grow sites. I mean, the diversity of California from 14,000 feet down to sea level of what you have in the Sierras and the coastal foothills. So a lot of these grow missions in the book are different terrain schemes that present different challenges. Going in on jet boats, then kayaks, with a dog on a kayak, our lead apprehension dog, Canine Phoebe, who, as you know, has a national record of 116 cartel bites.
That's amazing.
And 900 arrests where she didn't have to bite, and she's the friendliest female that would do hip checks and belly scratches with my yellow lab, right? So, the book is available on Amazon on all platforms. Print, as you see here, Kindle ebook. We did an Audible. And it was my publisher. My publisher is Caribou, which is the book site of Recoil Off-Grid, and Gun Digest. We're all one big company. And we were the first Audible book that I got to read for that they decided to try the Audible launch with. We're all listening to Audibles.
Yep. We're
all listening to podcasts. We're not, we're getting the book for the pictures and the hardcover and the copy, but we're listening to our books. So the Audible was done in Atlanta with Billboard artist, music producer Trammell Starks, a good friend of mine. I got to read for it over a 5-6 day period, but he, just on his own dime, because he did not know the story and was so moved by it. He did an original score musically.
Yep.
He did sound effects.
Yep.
You know, the water trickling through the creeks,
it's
the
great.
Gunfire. Yeah.
I listened to it too. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Because I read the first half and then I was like, oh, I got to get through this.
Oh, you went to the Audible.
And so I did
All
the
right.
first half on the book and then the second half through the Audible. And it was really great.
No,
Very well produced.
Glad you liked it.
And it's cool, like, since it's your story, having your voice in there, I feel like it makes it feel like a little more authentic, like you're actually hearing it from the source. So that's great.
It was a good way to relive it in a safe environment.
Yeah.
Because that studio was really cool. So you can get any of that on Amazon. If you want personalized copies, you can just get to me. I do personalized packages. I have signature blades with V-knives.
Nice.
I've made it up with Mike Bellicamp, who started at the Spyderco factory in the 90s and now has a company called V-knives. We have the Thin Green Line Trailblazer line of blades, fixed and folded, that were specifically designed for what we needed that I didn't get to carry. And I'll do personalized book copies, send them out as packages. And you can access that through my website, email at johnnorris.com. That's just JOHNNORS.com. On Instagram, Facebook, all social medias, it's JOHNNORES. Just look for the blue check because there's a lot of imposters trying to get money from you guys. And
it's probably those cartel guys trying to get back at you.
Yeah, just solicit stupid stuff. So you can get a hold of me. And don't hesitate, please, to direct message me on either of my social media platforms or through an email through my website. If you have interest in the game warden profession, and I can help anyway with young people coming up, and I'm getting that from all over the country now, and we're getting good people in. Issues on the cartel, public safety issues. I speak and teach this stuff all over the country. And if you need a speaker at an event, I do that all over, and we do it throughout the year around other things we're doing for the outreach front, like what I'm doing today here with Morgan. So reach out anytime, and I appreciate it.
Awesome. John Norris, thank you so much, sir.
Thanks for having me, bud.
Rad.